Hello everyone, and welcome to another part of What If Deku Had the Infinity Gauntlet. If you enjoy, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. I did not write this story. The original writer is Lord Wolf. Please support them. Now let's dive in. So tell me again. Shigaraki took off the hand covering his face. Which of us is the leader now? Sneering down at Chisaki, who laid strapped down to a prison gurney. Both of his arms were in a cast as a result of his injuries at the hands of Midoriya. Looks like apotheosis really roughed you up. He mocked. He looked at the blue case in his hands. As much as he would have loved to get the completed bullets, those were apparently destroyed during the earlier battle. So he'd have to settle for these prototype bullets. I'll make sure to put these to good use. He continued to try and get a rise out of Overhaul, but the man just continued to stare off into space blankly. Not even Compress, taking his left arm for revenge, got a reaction. Tamura wondered what Midoriya did to break him so badly. Really nothing to say? Shigaraki, the police and heroes will be here soon. We need to cut this short. Compress tried to hurry this along. In a moment. Shigaraki scowled at his underling. He noticed Chisaki was mumbling something under his breath. I'm sorry, what was that? You can't beat him. No one can. The defeated man whispered quietly. Those words seemed to piss Shigaraki off even more. You know what I think. He said as he started decaying his remaining arm. Maybe someone who goes around preaching his hatred for quirks shouldn't have one. Smirking at the man's pained grimace, Tamura decided he'd rather this guy live and suffer than see him decay into dust, so he cut off the rest of the arm before his quirk could destroy him. Alright, let's go. Putting his father's hand back over his face, he turned to leave. Too late. The masked magician pointed off into the distance where a group of squad cars were fast approaching. Suddenly, from out of nowhere, a wall of blue fire was erected along the highway, obstructing their path. Miss me? Looking off to the left, they spotted a familiar figure making his way towards them. Dabi, dressed in his normal outfit with a few new additions. He was now wearing black metallic gauntlets that went up to his biceps with metal plating shaped like scales and fingertips ending in sharp points resembling claws. Like itchy skin. Tamura replied. What are you doing here? The kid sent me to make sure you get away. Dabi answered. What game is he playing at? Shigaraki snapped at him. No game. He still considers you a friend for reasons that are beyond my understanding. Dabi chuckled. Get out of here. I'll cover your escape. Tamura stared at him for a moment before getting back into the truck, followed by Mr. Compress. Dabi watched them drive off with a pleased smirk on his face before turning to look down at Overhaul. Ouch, that has to hurt. The scarred man created a blue flame in the palm of his gauntlet-covered hands. These nifty little support devices were something Midoriya came up with to prevent his quirk from burning him anymore. This is going to hurt even more. Trust me, I know a thing or two about severe burns. Pressing his fire to the man's bleeding stump, he seared the wound closed. Gaha! Chisaki hollered in pain. Ah! It hurts so much. Dabi mocked him. Suck it up. We don't want you bleeding to death now, do we? Seeing the man passed out from the pain, he pressed a finger to his communicator. Dragon here. No, Tamura didn't kill him, I have him right now. Reporting his success, he received new orders from his boss. Got it. A portal appeared on the ground close to them. Dabi burned through the restraints holding Chisaki down and picked him up before tossing him roughly into the portal. Making sure no one was looking again, he followed, jumping into the very same portal. Later, hospital. Izuku sat in the waiting room. His eyes were closed, while his hands were clasped together. It almost looked like he was meditating. The teen's right index finger was absent-mindedly tracing the power stone on his gauntlet as he thought about his latest battle. A glitch? Something I missed perhaps? Why now? His mind wandered to why One for All was experiencing issues. Was something wrong with the quirk? It didn't behave like this before. He didn't understand. None of the other stones did this. All for One didn't glitch out on him, and those two quirks were quite literally cut from the same cloth. Putting these queries aside for later, he decided to focus on the eyes he felt were watching him. I see that Lemillion was able to successfully rescue you. Opening his eyes, he spotted Aizawa, underground hero and teacher of U.A, staring at him. Where is he? The gruff-looking man just silently stared at him for a few more seconds before answering. Upstairs, getting checked out by the medical staff. Aizawa walked over and sat down a few chairs away from him. Good. Izuku stared at him for a few moments before changing the topic. There was always something he wanted to ask this man after learning about him from Uraraka. You're Class 1A's homeroom teacher. Your former students had mixed things to say about you. Is that so? Aizawa's expression didn't change. What did they say? That you were overall a good teacher, though your deceptive methods could be frustrating at times. The gauntlet wearer smirked at him. Sometimes a logical deception was necessary to bring out their best and push them to their highest potential. The underground hero justified. Personally, I prefer the more honest approach. I told Ida, Uraraka and Todoroki the truth about my goals and how my department operates. Izuku explained to him. I doubt you told them everything. Aizawa, like others, suspected that he had a few villains working for him behind the scenes. They were almost certain that the masked agent that worked for Midoriya was the hero killer. Well, there are some aspects of my department they aren't permitted to know about. The green-haired teen shrugged. It's mostly just a bunch of classified government stuff. They need not concern themselves with that. He was purposely vague as to not give away any information that could be used against him. Can I ask you something, Mr. Aizawa? Yes. The underground hero nodded while side-eyeing him. I'm not sure if All Might told you, but originally I was planning on using my Infinity Gauntlet to become a hero. Izuku told him. I was going to try out for you. And show the world that I could be a hero using science and imagination to surpass any and every quirk. To show everyone who grew up like me that the world doesn't have to be unfair. So I was wondering. Had I gone down that path and had I been accepted into the school, would you have allowed me to be in your class? I'm not going to lie. If you had potential and the drive, I think you would have excelled in the hero course. The underground hero said honestly. Now though. After some of the things you've done, you don't belong in the hero course. Because I'm still technically quirkless? Izuku inquired with amusement. No, because you took the easy way. Aizawa said, making the boy pause and really look at him. You didn't even try to be a hero. You could have gotten what you wanted if you became a hero. It would have been much harder to change society, but you choose the easier path instead. I can assure you, my path was anything but easy. He glared at the hero. I had to do what I did. It was the only way to make everyone see what I saw. What did you see? Aizawa asked him. When I became a criminal consultant, I got to see the ugly side of our hero-based society. He turned his head away from the man and looked off into space. Do you know what I witnessed out there? Rather than answer him, Shoyuta Aizawa let him continue, having a pretty good idea what he was talking about. Pro-heroes taking bribes, ignoring crimes that wouldn't boost their popularity, people with quirks they couldn't properly control which led them to being labeled as villains, and worst of all, the way quirkless people are treated as something less than human. How could All Might, the great symbol of peace, allow such things to happen? Why is it only someone with power that can change anything? It's just not fair. That's when I came to the realization of how broken our society really is. How our pillar of justice was nothing more than a lie. Izuku glared at the wall. All Might didn't hold the world together. He held his ideal fantasy world together by a lie he created of a hero that never truly existed in the first place. So your new goal was to correct this? Aizawa sounded skeptical. I still don't understand how what you've done will lead to a better society. That's because you're not thinking in the long term. Izuku explained. By purging all the fake heroes, by exposing All Might for the fraud that he was, by nearly bringing the system on the brink of collapse, I've opened the door for everyone to finally ask questions. By making them take a good look at their heroes, they can now see what I see. The discontent of the people will lead to inevitable improvement. Things will become fair now. The whole reason it was never fixed in the first place is because All Might and the other heroes kept everyone blissfully compliant. Break everything, then let the people see how wrecked the system is and they'll beg you to fix it. Aizawa summed up the kid's plan in his own head. He could admire the boy for his understanding of how the system worked and where the flaws that he could exploit were. However, Midoriya's way of thinking was problematic. His unhealthy obsessive compulsion to improve everything and make it fair, as he called it, will only lead to ruin. One thing that Izuku Midoriya had yet to understand was that he would eventually reach a dead end. A society would only tolerate his so-called improvements for so long before it starts to feel like tyrannical control. What happens when they are no longer compliant with what he does? What will happen when the people turn on Midoriya? That's the part that scared Aizawa. All that power in the hands of an obsessed boy spurned and hurt by the world. What would he do when everything falls apart? Probably something terrible. Well, this was a nice talk. Rather than sit with the man in awkward silence, Izuku decided to get up and check on Todoroki. He needed to make a quick stop to the restroom first and wash the blood off his gauntlet. Izawa watched him get up and leave. When he was gone around the corner, he reached into one of his pouches and felt the small metal object that was still there. The reason he was momentarily caught off guard, the reason he was hit and captured was because of this bullet that he successfully pickpocketed from Midoriya while he was right next to him mid-battle. He honestly didn't know why he took it. Izawa had no plans to use it. He doubted it would do anything if it were to hit Midoriya, but intuition told him it might be useful later down the road. You could never know when you might need to permanently erase someone's quirk. Restroom. Using some water and a cloth, Izuku cleaned the blood of Sir Night Eye off his device. He wasn't adverse to blood. After all, he worked with the stuff before, but he would rather keep his hands as clean as possible. Looking down at the soul stone in his palm, he thought about the two quirks he acquired during this whole thing. Crystal and Overhaul. That latter of which he was already thinking about all the practical applications that could be made with it. Looking in the mirror, he examined his still ripped open shirt. Touching it with his bare hand, his curiosity over this quirk got the better of him. Overhaul, in an instant his black button-down shirt was destroyed and reassembled back into an undamaged state, albeit missing a few buttons. Leaving the restroom, he walked down the halls until he made it to the room that held his loyal knights. Izuku walked in without knocking. Shoto Todoroki was sitting up in the bed with a few bandages around his temple. Uraraka and Ida were sitting in chairs off to the side of the bed, still in their gear from the earlier battle. "All right, how did this happen?" Izuku ordered. He wasn't mad, but he was a little tired. "It was my own fault," Shoto said without hesitation. "I let my guard down. I thought my opponent was beaten." He clenched his fists in frustration at having made a similar mistake when he fought Katsuki Bakugo. "Failure is our greatest teacher. I'm not going to point out what you did wrong and chastise you for it when you've already done that yourself," the gauntlet user explained. "Even I make mistakes. I don't expect you three to be a perfect cohesive unit overnight." He looked over to Uraraka next. "Have you got anything to add?" "Well, our combination move worked pretty well." She beamed. "Mega Hail? That's good." Izuku smiled back at her, then turned to Ida. "I was able to successfully retrieve all the injured police and heroes," the glasses-wearing boy summed up. Part of him was paranoid that Midoriya somehow knew about the message he passed on to Azui. He just didn't know, and that was always the scariest part about dealing with Izuku Midoriya. "With your speed, I imagine that went quickly and efficiently." He nodded. "Just file everything into the computer when we get back to base." Izuku seemed more dismissive than normal, almost like his thoughts were elsewhere. Without another word, he turned around to leave. "Izuku." Ochako used his first name. "Is everything all right?" Midoriya slowly turned to face her. "Yeah," he finally said. "Everything is fine." Well, that wasn't entirely true. He had a lot on his mind, so much that needed to be done, but he didn't want to worry her with his problems. Izuku left the hospital room with Ida and Shoto both watching him go now. They too noticed something off about him. Izuku, after leaving the room, made his way to where Eri was being treated. Unfortunately, he couldn't visit her as she was being kept in quarantine due to the high fever and the unknown status of her quirk. However, he was able to watch her rest through the window. The gauntlet user wasn't fully paying attention to the doctor speaking until he mentioned something about Sir Night Eye's condition. "What was that?" Izuku asked, turning his eyes away from the unconscious child. "The hero Sir Night Eye. His injuries are too severe," the doctor explained. "We did all we could, but he won't make it." If Midoriya felt anything, he certainly didn't show it on his blank, emotionless face. "Which room is he in?" he said solemnly. "Sir." Mirio kneeled down next to the bed. It was so hard seeing his teacher, his mentor, laying weak and dying. Tubes going in and out of him, bandages wrapped around the stump where his arm used to be. These wounds were fatal and there was nothing that could save him. The staff told him so to prepare him for what he was going to see. "Mirio," Night Eye whispered as his tired eyes landed on his pupil. "I'm glad you're safe." "I'm sorry. I failed." The blonde was crying now. "This happened to you because I wasn't strong enough. You were amazing." The dying man smiled. "You tried to save Eri even at the cost of your own body. You're a true hero, Mirio." He coughed lightly in pain. He didn't want the young man thinking it was his fault when in reality it wasn't. Night Eye's legs moved on their own, just like All Might would have wanted. His thoughts then drifted back to what he saw in Midoriya's future when he got a chance to use his quirk on him. He had to tell Mirio before he died. "Mirio, I don't know if the future can be changed or if it is set in stone. My vision of All Might's future was distorted, so maybe things can end differently. What are you saying, sir? Togata asked. I need to tell you what I saw in Izuku Midoriya's future. Night Eye reached his hand out and gently pulled his pupil closer so no one else could hear what was said. The blonde's eyes widened when Sir explained his vision. Much of it he didn't even understand. When he finished, Mirio pulled away to look at his teacher. Now that you know, maybe you can stop it. Just heed my warning. I don't know how I'm supposed to stop that. I don't even know what happened. You said everything just went blank. Mirio said. Everything went blank because there was no future that I could see past that point. Night Eye wheezed. It was like everything just stopped. Sir? What do I do? Mirio pleaded. I don't know, but you need to keep Eri away from him. The slowly fading hero told him. Whatever Midoriya does in the future has something to do with her. The former sidekick glanced over at the window. Mirio followed his gaze to see Izuku Midoriya himself walking into the observation room. The director took one apathetic look at the hero on his deathbed before turning around and leaving without a word. Mirio glared at his back at how cold and indifferent he was acting and mentally vowed to have a word with him later. For now he had to be here with Sir in his last moments. He owed it to the man. Another room. Oh wow! Izuku's eyes widened at the state of Kirishima. Since there was nothing he could do for Night Eye, he went to check on the other injured parties. The red-headed boy was nearly completely covered in bandages. You brought new meaning to being a human shield. You can't blame a man for trying. Kirishima shrugged with a toothy smile. You're right. Izuku smiled back. In the end, that's all I ask. For the heroes to try and do the best they possibly can, while constantly striving to improve and perfect. Reaching into the inside pocket of his suit, he pulled out a small white card. He also took out a pen that he got from the doctor's clipboard and scribbled something on the card. As of right now, I only have 3 volunteers in my hero training program. Your former classmates, I'm sure you remember them. He handed the injured boy the card. Knights of Balance? Kirishima read the title aloud. That's the official name of the H.R.D's hero training program. Should you be interested, you'd be immediately transferred from U.A into the program. Izuku began listing off all the benefits that Ijiro would gain. The redhead, on the other hand, was barely listening while he looked at the written words scribbled at the bottom of the card. Codename, Aegis, Shield of the Gods. Aegis? He didn't hate the name, but honestly Kirishima preferred his own hero name to this. He also couldn't deny the enticing offer Midoriya was presenting. However, Izuku suddenly stopped talking when Kirishima handed him back his card. Green eyes curiously staring at him. Thanks for the offer. I really appreciate the director of the HRD showing an interest in my career, but I'm going to have to politely refuse. The bandage-covered teen said as confidently as possible as to not offend the other. May I ask why? Izuku looked at him oddly. The 3 former U.A students that he offered this opportunity to didn't turn it down. Well, Ida didn't take it immediately, but after a bit of coaxing he saw the benefits and joined of his own free will. Look, I'm sure your program is great and all, but as a man I need to walk my own path to being a hero. He said proudly. Izuku smiled, fully understanding his reasoning. Very well then. Using the quirk overhaul for the second time, the gauntlet user shredded the card into tiny bits. I wish you the best on your path, Red Riot. He really wanted a 4th member for his knights, and someone with a good defensive quirk would have been a great addition to the team. Oh well. Some people had their own desired path to walk like Kirishima. Turning around he made to leave, with a wave goodbye, and walked out of the hero in training's hospital room. I need to check my list. Find the next possible member. Walking down the main hall of the hospital he mentally went through the other possible candidates. Hey! His thoughts were halted at the sound of a voice calling his attention. Turning to the left he spotted Mirio Togata coming towards him at a rather aggressive pace. Allez mignon. I take it Sir Night Eye has finally passed. Izuku said nonchalantly. His mind was still other places when he spoke and wasn't fully paying attention to the other teen. Mirio silently fumed. Something about the way he so carelessly said that really got under his skin. Why didn't you save him? Mirio finally asked what was bothering him. Pardon? He didn't understand the question being asked. You could have saved Sir. I've seen the power you wield. Mirio said. So why didn't you save him? I couldn't. Izuku said with a shrug, like it wasn't a big deal. Yes, you could have. The blonde student argued. No. I couldn't have. The gauntlet user brandished his device. The time stone can't heal something if there are too many missing pieces. When he took that blow for you, his fate was sealed. Honestly, with a quirk like his, he should have stuck to being a sidekick. If that idiot planned on going into combat, he should have been wearing armor or used a proper offensive support device. Izuku went off on all the things that he perceived that the now deceased hero did wrong. He had no business being there anyway, if you want my opinion. I could have handled it better alone. Mirio's hand gripped the front of his shirt and slammed his body against the wall behind him, finally having enough of Midoriya's cold, heartless assessment of his master. "Shut up!" the young hero shouted. Izuku didn't even flinch as he was forcefully pushed into the wall. He kept his emerald eyes locked with the other's blue orbs. "Careful, I just repaired my shirt," Izuku told him. "I'll assume this outburst is part of your grieving for Sir Night-Eye. Were you two closer than I originally assessed? What exactly is your problem with me?" "My problem is that he's dead and you don't even care." Mirio was close to tears now. "I do care, but as I said, there's nothing I could have done for him." Izuku tried to explain. "I wish there was something I could do, but I can't. So there's no point in getting upset about things I can't change when I could focus on things I can." Mirio finally let go of his shirt. "For example, how do you think Eri is going to feel when she finds out that one of the heroes that tried to save her was killed in the process?" He paused, seeing the older teen's eyes widened in realization. "Exactly. For her sake, it's best not to tell her for now. She can find out later when she's mentally ready." Still seeing a look of despair, Izuku reached out and placed a hand on Mirio's shoulder. "Despite what I said about him being foolish, I do think Sir Night-Eye was a brave man for what he did. It may seem cold to you, but I just prefer not to dwell on things I can't help and would rather look forward to the future. He's got a good control of that temper." Izuku thought as he walked away. "I honestly expected him to hit me." Mentally adding him to the list of potential candidates. Mirio watched him leave with a solemn expression on his face. He came to confront Midoriya while angry and ready to give a piece of his mind. However, he found himself somewhat agreeing with the younger teen's logic. There really was nothing he could do when Sir willingly shielded Mirio and Eri with his own body and was fatally wounded because of it. Plus, Midoriya had no personal connection to the future-seeing hero, so of course he wouldn't be broken up over it. Midoriya has even been quoted several times on the news that he views heroes as nothing more than public servants, and that if they want to be true heroes then they should start acting like them. That could explain his cold attitude. Still though, it wasn't right to view human life like that. Heroes were people too after all. Midoriya had obviously failed to realize that. L'H.Q. Remind me why we're keeping this trash alive again? Dabi asked Stain, who stood beside him as they looked down at the body of Kai Chisaki. The man was bandaged and healed the best they could, placed on the bed in one of the many prison cells they had here at the base. The first ever prisoner they ever had actually. Our boss wants him alive for information. Stain said as they left the cell, it automatically locked behind them on the way out. In case the bloodsucker failed in her mission. He'll have to get what he wants out of Chisaki the old-fashioned way. Torture. Dabi confirmed as he followed his teacher. What happens after that? Kill him? No. Stain sounded disappointed. Midoriya doesn't kill. He'll probably have me do it for him. Why doesn't he kill? The scarred man asked. The truth is I think he's squeamish when it comes to killing. Stain said. He helped me kill and maim several heroes, but he never made the killing blow himself. That's the kind of person Midoriya is. They stepped through the main door leaving the prison area of the base. So that's why he didn't kill Endeavor. Dabi said to himself. Well, he also felt that it is far greater punishment for that sorry excuse of a man to live in the ruins of his old life. The hero killer could somewhat agree with that at least. The two of them continued to talk as they made their way to the Midoriya's office. There the boy they were discussing was already waiting for them. Leaning against the front of his desk with his arms crossed. Guillotine. Dragon. Izuku greeted them. Where's Chameleon? Right here. Himiko waltzed into the office. Her most recent disguise already melting off her body into white sludge. Put some clothes on. Izuku demanded coldly. Did you get it? I did. She smiled and showed him the portable drive in her hand, ignoring his request to get dressed. Using the reality stone, Izuku yanked the drive out of her hand and into his. Good work, everyone. He smiled at what he liked to think of as the shadows of his nights. He walked around to his computer and plugged the device in. So, can we kill our guest then? Dabi asked eagerly. No. I need to confirm something before I make a decision as to what will be done with Kai Chisaki. That seemed to confirm what Stain told him about how Midoriya doesn't like killing. Dismissed. Without even looking at the three, he waved them off. Oh, one more thing. Dabi. He stopped the dark-haired man on the way out. Yeah? Dabi paused at the door wondering what his boss wanted. I'm assigning you and Todoroki to training together from now on. Izuku said, still looking at his computer. I don't think that's a good idea. Dabi warned. And why is that? Izuku finally looked up from the screen, meeting the other's piercing gaze with his own. After a short staring contest, Dabi finally blinked and turned away. It's nothing. Never mind. With that, the former villain left him alone. Alright, let's see what Chisaki was up to. Izuku wanted to know how the man was using Eri to make these bullets. He had a good idea, but he wanted to know for sure. Please remain calm. Mei frowned at the robotic voice. Still too monotone and echoed. She'd been working on giving Nemesis a few verbal responses. Izuku wasn't too keen on the idea of their pet project being able to talk, but he soon warmed up to the idea with some persuasion. Hello. Hello. Hello? Hello. She tried various different greetings with different tones and effects. The voice came from lines that she herself recorded with a microphone. She just deepened it and changed it around with the computer. The voice still sounded too monotone for her taste. It just needed more personality. Mei tried her best, she just wasn't a very good vocal performer. I'll ask Izuku. He's a great actor. If anyone could give Nemesis a good-sounding human-like voice, it would be him. Reaching for the phone, she quickly dialed his office upstairs to see if he was available for a quick thing. Mei's smile dropped when he didn't pick. That was odd considering he always answered when he saw her ID on his office phone. She tried the video chat through his computer, but he wasn't responding to that either. Getting up from her desk, Hatsum walked out of her lab curious to find out what was going on. Her gut told her that something was wrong with Izuku for him not to be answering her calls. Going through several corridors and one elevator, she made it to the main hall of the base. It was there that she saw the boy in question, flanked by his former villain associates Stain, Dabi and Toga. He was angrily trudging forward, hair shadowing his eyes. Izuku. Mei called. Midoriya seemed to notice her and finally stopped walking. Mei. He said quietly. You need to go back to your lab and stay there for a while. There was a certain edge to his tone that he never used when speaking to her. I was hoping you could help with something. She looked at him worriedly. Mei. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Please just go back to your lab and stay there. I promise I'll come by in a bit and help you with whatever you need. Izuku's eyes were hard and dark. There's just something I need to do. Please, go. Okay. Hatsum was now more concerned, her plans already forgotten. His villainous escorts didn't say a word. Those three rarely acknowledged her anyway. Not that she cared. Without another word, Izuku walked past her while Stain, Dabi and Toga followed. She watched him walk away wondering what was wrong with him. In the end, Mei decided to do what he asked and wait for him in the lab. She'd question him later, that was for sure. U.A. Principal's office. This is an interesting development. Nizu remarked as he examined the paper in his hand. A message written in code. The message was delivered by Class 1A student Tsuyu Azui and handed off to Midnight, who brought it to the principal. Apparently Ida gave it to her. The rated R hero said. It appears that one of Midoriya's loyal knights is not so loyal after all. The white creature smiled. Can you decode it? Midnight asked. Of course. Give me 20 minutes at most. Nizu said, taking a sip from his tea. I don't like this. She said. Neither do I, the principal agreed. What do you think Midoriya will do to Ida if he finds out about this? Midnight wondered. Nothing good. Now please, I need to figure out what this says. Nizu focused back on the coded message, asking her to leave. Shoyuta is definitely not going to like this. Midnight thought as she left. The last thing her friend and colleague wanted to hear was that Ida was purposely putting himself in serious danger again. Hospital. Uraraka walked around the waiting area, looking for a vending machine that could dispense something to drink. She had shed the top part of her white armor, helmet and mecha wings, leaving her in just the leggings and a black tank top. As she walked, she stretched her back and arms a bit, enjoying the freedom from that armor. Hey wing girl. Nijire Hato popped up in her field of vision, nearly making Ochako jump out of her skin. Geese. You scared me, Nijire-chan. The brown-haired girl laughed it off. Sorry. Nijire apologized. Anyway, what are you doing? Looking for a vending machine or a water fountain? Ochako replied honestly. Can I help you? You were amazing out there. Nijire blurted out. Oh. Thank you. The younger girl accepted the compliment. So you use those metal wings so you can fly, huh? She said. That's pretty cool. Actually, I use my quirk to fly. Uraraka explained. The wings just help me keep my balance and control my direction and velocity. That's really cool. The taller girl said, almost invading the other's personal space. What's your hero name? Well, I was going by Uravity, but I decided to go with the codename I was given. Angel. Uraraka told her. That's so cute. Whoever gave you that name must really like you. Nijire gushed, making the other girl's face tint a light shade of red. I am not sure about that. Uraraka denied. We're just friends. Okay. Nijire nodded, dropping the subject completely. The older girl then went on a barrage of other questions. Asking her about her quirk, her fighting style, that move she pulled off with Todoroki, and a bunch of other personal things that Uraraka didn't want to answer. While they were talking, upstairs in an observation room Mirio Togata was keeping a watchful eye on Eri while she rested. He thought about what Sir Night Eye told him before he died. The vision he described, neither of them understood what it meant. Midoriya laying in a crater, bruised and bleeding, in the middle of an empty battlefield. Despite seemingly defeated, he smiled, blood pouring from his mouth. Then everything went white. Sir said that he couldn't see any future past this point. What that entailed they had no idea. All they did know was that it had something to do with Eri. What does Eri have to do with this? Mirio wondered. He'd been thinking about how the girl fit into Midoriya's future plans and why it hinged on her. All he knew was that he had to keep Eri away from Izuku Midoriya. The real question was how? The boy was too powerful, both physically and politically. His influence on their society was far-reaching. It reminded him of when All Might described to him how the country was when All for One was reigning supreme. However, he didn't like comparing Midoriya to that man. In Mirio's mind he wasn't evil. There were redeeming qualities in Midoriya. He wasn't a monster or a killer, like those he associated with. He just needed a push in the right direction, and perhaps the future that Sir Night Eye saw could be prevented. Elsewhere. Why am I here? Chisaki asked quietly. Izuku stared down at the man on his knees. He looked broken and defeated. Some people would call this punishment enough, but not Izuku. Not after what he'd seen in the man's files. Pages and pages of what could only be described as torture. All inflicted on one little girl. Izuku had only seen such scientific barbarity used on lab rats and test animals. Add to fact that the man apparently used his quirk to kill and restore poor Eri over and over again to make those accursed bullets. He was so furious that he ordered Stain, Dabi and Toga to go the cells and get him. There they dragged the now armless Chisaki out of his prison and into the large state-of-the-art training room. Izuku spent an hour pacing the room, waiting for the man to wake up, thinking what he was going to do with him and letting his anger cloud his reasoning. When Chisaki finally came to consciousness, the young man had at last reached a decision. You're here to pay for your crimes. The gauntlet user said. The three villains watched Midoriya curiously as they had never seen him so worked up before. All I tried to do was return humanity back to normal. Chisaki began. Was that so wrong? Izuku just continued to stare at him. You of all people should understand. Why don't you hate these filthy mutations people call quirks? Quirks are tools, nothing more. Izuku said. Like a hand for grabbing, or a set of teeth for chewing. Biological tools, nothing more, nothing less. I told you this already. He sighed, not enjoying having to repeat himself. But you don't find yourself here on your knees at my mercy because of what you were trying to do. You find yourself here because of what you did do. Izuku leaned down to get on eye level with the man. His emerald eyes pierced the villain with so much hate. I want to know how many times. Chisaki swallowed the lump in his throat. How many times did you hurt Eri? How many times did you destroy and rebuild her? I don't know. Overhaul stuttered anxiously. Izuku's right hand reached out and gripped his throat. Give me an estimate then. He tightened his grip. You're a smart man, so give me a number. Still not getting an answer, he shook Chisaki roughly. Give me a damn number. 100. Chisaki spat out the only number he could think of. At least 100 times. He didn't know if that would appease the boy or not. God, he hoped. That wasn't so hard now, was it? Izuku released his hold on the other's neck with a pleased smirk on his face. That's a good solid 3-digit number for me to work with. He took off his gray suit jacket and rolled up the sleeves of his black dress shirt. A little something you should know about me, Kai Chisaki. I'm a person who believes in balance and fairness. He took in a deep breath as he prepared himself. Things like an eye, for example. I also believe that punishments should fit the crime. Reaching out with his right hand again, he grabbed Chisaki by the face and activated the quirk overhaul. The man's eyes widened for a moment as he was nearly destroyed and then reassembled in a split second. Ku! The man coughed up blood. His insides felt like they were on fire. Blood circulation wasn't working properly either. Guess the organ placement is a bit off. Izuku said with morbid fascination. He repeated the process again. This time when Chisaki was rebuilt, the organs were in their proper place, but his skin was missing in a few patches. Don't worry, I'll get this down eventually. After all, we have 98 more practice runs to go. He repeated, killing and restoring the man for the third time. That's 3. Hello. Izuku turned to the 3 former villains that were just standing there watching. I brought you all here to keep track for me. So start counting. 3. Stain said as he watched the boy he'd come to respect tear apart and put back together Chisaki. Personally, he somewhat agreed with Midoriya's philosophy. Oftentimes the justice system failed to properly punish evildoers. The former hero killer had seen plenty of miscarriages of justice, and he'd even enacted his own brand of justice on more than a few who deserved it. It honestly didn't matter to him if the kid wanted to indulge himself and deal out some proper punishment. The only thing that surprised him was how calm Midoriya was acting despite the obvious rage he was feeling. 4. Dabi too watched with interest. Stain said that Midoriya didn't usually get his hands dirty in this way and that he didn't have the stomach for this kind of brutality. Yet here he was, obliterating another human being over and over again. All because Midoriya felt some sort of empathy for one little girl. What was so special about her? He couldn't help but wonder. 5. Toga had a dreamy look in her eyes as she continued the count. All that blood and gore. It was like a work of art being painted in action. This was the side of Izuku that she loved. The ruthless, aggressive, vindictive side. The part that he rarely let out. She found it all really attractive. 6. Izuku stared down at the deformed mess of a human. This man needed to pay for what he did to Eri. He dealt with his fair share of bullies all his life. That what Chisaki was a bully, and just like all bullies, they were cowardly and weak on the inside. He'd barely begun and already the man was reduced to a quivering, screaming wretch. 7. The gauntlet user was disgusted by Chisaki's cries of pain. Come now. If Eri was able to withstand this, then a grown man like you should have no problem. He sneered as he destroyed and rebuilt him once again. 8. Over and over, Izuku kept at it. Obliterating and recreating the body of Kai Chisaki. Slowly, bit by bit, he was starting to get the hang of how the quirk worked and how to properly put a human form back together. Izuku continued to think about how similar Eri's situation was to his own when he was a child. Unfortunately, there was no one to save him from Bakugo's abuse. He had to sit there and take it. Everyone around him just stood there and watched. Some even joined in. All those memories reminded him of how much he really hated Katsuki Bakugo. Izuku realized a long time ago that his childish admiration of his former bully was just a lie he told himself. He had subconsciously suppressed every negative feeling and thought he had back then, because that's what a hero would do, or so he thought. It wasn't until he made his way through the criminal underground that he was able to open his mind and learn. He learned how to think like villains, he learned how to lie, how to deceive, and more importantly, he learned how to hate. Izuku didn't just blindly hate like Tamura Shigaraki. He was smart enough to use his hate to direct it into something positive. He pointed his hate directly at what was wrong with society and drove through it like a wrecking ball. Every person that he demolished with his hatred and fury deserved it. All Might made him waste years of his life giving him hope for the future, a future that he too could be a hero in. His lies destroyed so much of Izuku, took so much from him that it was only fair that All Might lose everything he built up in turn. Now here he was using that very hatred to inflict the same pain that Chisaki inflicted on that innocent child, back onto him. He deserves it. They all deserve it. Izuku must have blanked out in his rage, because before he knew it they had reached 100 in the count. Izuku was panting as he stared down at the pile of blood, bones, and flesh that used to be Chisaki. He kneeled down, reaching into the pile and destroyed it even further into meaty chunks. He slapped it several more times aggressively, using overhaul until all that was left was a splattered pile of blood, spanning several panels of the training room. He stumbled for a second, but quickly righted himself. Just as he was about to rub his face with his right hand, it was then that he noticed the red life fluid that covered it. That seemed to cause what he just did to set in. I killed him. Turning from the mess he bent over, emptying the contents of his stomach on the floor. Told you he was squeamish. Stain leaned over and spoke under his breath to Dabi. He murdered a man 100 times. The scarred man whispered back as they watched their leader continue throwing up. Have any of us ever done something like that? When Izuku was finished, he wiped his mouth on his sleeve. He finally remembered that he had an audience. Standing up straight, he faced the three of them. I don't think I need to tell you three what will happen to you if you breathe a word of this to anyone. He threatened. This never happened. As far as anyone was concerned, Kai Chisaki was killed by Shigaraki when the League attacked the prison transport. Loud and clear, boss. Stain said the word boss with a mocking tone. He liked to think of himself more as a partner rather than a subordinate to the kid. That was amazing. Toga ran up to pounce on him only to get knocked back by an invisible force. Don't touch me. Izuku glared at her as he made to leave the training room. Hey, what about the bloody mess? Dabi called after him. I hope you're not expecting us to clean this shit up. The training room is programmed to clean itself, remember. The gauntlet user spat over his shoulder before exiting. The group looked down to see the panels that were covered in the splattered remains of what used to be Kai Chisaki were already retracting into the floor and being replaced by new clean ones, leaving the entire facility pristine as if a vicious murder didn't happen here. Izuku slowly and quietly made his way to his personal quarters, completely stone-faced. Closing and sealing the vault door behind him, he entered his bathroom. Without a second thought, he took his clothes off and stepped into the shower, leaving only his Infinity Gauntlet on, of course. He wouldn't dare risk taking the thing off for any reason. Washing the blood off himself, he got dried off and redressed in clean clothes. Walking over to his bed, he sat down, took a deep breath and processed what he'd just committed. He killed someone. Another human being. However, after what Chisaki had done, Izuku hesitated to call him a human being. He'd still had never killed anyone before. Sure, he helped Stain take out a few people in the past, but to actually do it himself was another matter entirely. That man needed to die though. He needed to pay for what he did to Eri. Her situation was just like his own when he was a child, only no one saved him. One less monster in the world. Killing Chisaki was a necessary evil. He told himself. He can't hurt her ever again. Laying down in the bed, Izuku grabbed his phone, sending Mei a message that she'd have to wait till tomorrow. He needed to rest. The green-haired teen hadn't slept in almost 4 days. Pushing everything in his mind away, he closed his eyes and let exhaustion finally take him. The dream. Izuku once again found himself in the same landscape as his last dream. The 8 figures weren't facing him this time. Instead, they were together in a circle, seemingly conversing with one another. Izuku floated a little closer, using the fact that they had yet to notice him, to hear what they were saying. Killed, murdered that. One of the figures spoke. Izuku winced, having trouble making out their words. It sounded like static was covering their voices. He could only get bits and pieces. Used that power, like your brother. Another said. Shouldn't, interfered. The dark-haired woman spoke. Only way, his attention. The white-haired leader who tried to communicate with him before spoke this time. Going about, wrong. The woman spoke again. Let me, there's still, in him. She turned from the group and looked right at Izuku. Giving him a hopeful smile, she reached out towards him, making the boy flinch and pull away. What do you want from me? He tried to say, but no words came out. He only just realized that he had no mouth in this world. She tried to say. The dream ended there as everything sunk into absolute darkness. A man dressed in a black and gray hero outfit with large oversized buttons made to look like screw heads, was frantically ducking through alleys and running, seemingly for his life. He used the metal drills he had for hands to tunnel his way into the walls of the abandoned buildings around him. Stopping to take a breather, he quietly hid in the darkness of the building. He was so sure he lost his pursuers. Drill bit. A voice from the shadows said venomously. The hero now known as Drill Bit flinched and frantically glanced around for the source. You ran pretty far. He knew that voice. It belonged to the shadowy masked agent of the HRD. The heroes that end up in Midoriya's narrow crosshairs that refuse to come in quietly and accept their punishment. This man was the ghost, the nightmare that came for them from the shadows and brought them in forcefully. If you think I'll willingly let my quirk be taken by that lunatic boy. The hero's drill hand spun rapidly. Then think again. I worked hard, I spent years training my quirk. I refuse to lose it. I'm sure your wife would be happy for you to lose your quirk. The voice of the hunter spoke from the darkness. What was it you said last time you beat her? He asked mockingly. If you ever speak of this to anyone, I'll drill you full of holes. How fitting for the tunneling hero Drillbit. He chuckled. Shut up. You don't know anything. Drillbit shouted back. We know plenty. We have enough evidence to bury you and your hero career. A tall figure with a black mask that covered everything but his messy hair and grinning mouth came out of the darkness. Last chance to come quietly. Never. The hero refused. I was hoping you'd say that. The masked agent licked his lips greedily. I'm going to enjoy this. Bring it on, you masked freak. Drillbit charged at him and the two engaged. The fight didn't last long. All it took was one cut on the hero's body and it was over. Drillbit, like many, had no idea what the masked agent's quirk really was. Had he known then, he might have been a bit more careful. How pathetic. Stain in disguise spat as he stared at the paralyzed form of this sorry excuse for a hero. From what I've seen, having your quirk taken seems to cause the victims a lot of pain the longer he applies that gauntlet. He pulled out his phone and contacted his boss. I hope Midoriya makes it hurt even more just for you, pig. Stain said darkly as he punched in the coordinates. No sooner than he did that, a portal opened up behind the fallen pro. The hero hunter roughly kicked the man into the warp gate and vanished back into the shadows he called home. Hello, Drillbit. The hero's eyes anxiously glanced around at a stark barren office. From his position on the floor he could see Izuku Midoriya glaring at him while he leaned against the desk behind him. I hope my associate wasn't too rough on you. He spoke sarcastically, arms were crossed over his chest. I could go into a slew of reasons as to why you're here, but I'm really not in the mood, so I'll just cut to the chase. He walked over to the soon-to-be quirkless man, bent down over him and gripped his face with his Infinity Gauntlet. Wait. Please wait. Drillbit begged, then started screaming as his quirk was forcefully drained from him. His drill-like appendages slowly reduced into normal human hands. Izuku left his unconscious body prone on the floor like a discarded ragdoll. He looked at his bare right hand and activated the quirk he just stole. In an instant the flesh and bones were turned into a metal drill that started spinning rapidly with just a thought. I wonder. An idea ran through his head. Izuku returned his hand to normal and repeated the process, this time adding something extra. Drill plus gigantification. In an instant his hand morphed into an even bigger, almost absurdly sized drill. The new appendage almost put a hole in the ceiling. Whoa! He quickly put it all back into the soul stone to prevent himself from destroying his city office. Okay, don't try that outside of the training room ever again. The teen promised to himself. He then remembered the paralyzed, unconscious and now quirkless hero laying in the middle of his office. Someone come get the trash. He called. The door opened and one of the tall Titan robots came in, ducking its head down so it could fit through the door. The machine grabbed the former hero's body by the leg and dragged it out. Izuku then noticed the detective standing outside the entrance watching the whole thing. I assume you're my next appointment? The boy waved the older gentleman inside. Good evening. The man said politely as he walked into the office and introduced himself. My name is Detective Naomasa. Nice to meet you. I know of you, but don't believe ever properly met, have we? Izuku greeted him and sat down at his desk. We did once. The detective supplied. Actually, that was Himiko Toga impersonating me. Izuku corrected. Sorry about that deception, by the way. He apologized with an awkward smile. It's fine. Naomasa clenched his fist. It wasn't fine. Had they been clever enough back then and not underestimated Midoriya, then maybe all this could have been prevented. Water under the bridge. So what can I do for you? Izuku asked. Well, with how well you handled that Shai Hasaikai incident, I was hoping you could lend your help on catching the League of Villains. If anyone knew what the group was doing or where they were hiding, it would be a former member. Midoriya's power could easily beat them without even trying. Let me be frank with you, detective. Izuku folded his hands together. I'm actually not supposed to involve myself with cases like these. Truth. Naomasa secretly used his quirk, lie detector, to find out what he could while he was here in the real Midoriya's presence. But then why were you involved in Nightai's case? The quirk erasing bullet problem didn't just pose a threat to heroes, it posed a threat to all of society. Well, not Izuku, of course. Those bullets would have had no effect on him as his genetics had no quirk factor to begin with. I petitioned the Prime Minister to briefly lift the restrictions that forbid me from using my Infinity Gauntlet to involve myself with hero and villain conflicts. Truth. The detective's quirk confirmed the honesty in Midoriya's words. I would love to help you catch Shigaraki and his group. He continued. Lie. So he didn't actually want to catch them for some reason, Naomasa concluded. You must at least have some idea where they are though. Any leads to point us in the right direction? I don't have a single clue as to the location of the League of Villains. Izuku said, looking him straight in the eyes. Truth/lie. The contradicting answer that his quirk gave him told Naomasa one thing. That Midoriya didn't know where the League was, but he had an idea where they might be. Why would he not want to find them? What exactly was he gaining by letting the League of Villains continue to exist? Those were the real questions that plagued him. Trying to figure out what Midoriya was up to was like fighting a losing battle. Well, thank you for your time, Director Midoriya. This seemed like a waste of time after all. The detective was about to get up and abruptly leave, but Izuku's light chuckle stopped him. Don't go yet. You came all the way here. What else you got? The teen asked him with a smile. I'm sorry? Now Naomasa was even more confused. Something that always seemed to happen whenever this boy was involved. Listen, we don't have to talk as officials. Show me something and I might just speak my honest advice as an everyday person, and if you decide to take that advice, well, that's up to you. Izuku winked at him. I was a very devious consultant and strategist for hire at one point in my life, remember? I see. Naomasa smiled as well. It seemed that was the best he would get from him. Kurogiri was spotted in the mountains near Jakuo. Naomasa said while pulling out a pen and a small notepad. Alone? The teen queried. Yes. He answered. Multiple sightings, in multiple locations? Izuku asked, and the law official nodded. Pattern? Random. Naomasa supplied. Seemingly. Izuku leaned back in his chair, contemplating this turn of events. I remember that Kurogiri never left Shigaraki's side unless ordered. He's probably looking for something, or someone. He said in a way that implied he could do what he wanted with that info. I get the feeling that All for One probably had other allies. Anything else? Izuku wondered. Nothing that would require your immediate attention. Naomasa paused. Actually, there is one thing. The man pulled out his phone and searched for something. There is this one case that's been causing a few heroes and police some frustration lately. He handed his phone to Midoriya, who took it and saw that it was a video. He played it and watched the scene unfold. A villain that posts videos of his crimes online? That's absurd. Izuku chuckled. How has nobody caught him yet? Well, for starters, this gentle criminal fellow is very elusive. The detective explained. Second, no high-ranked hero will take the case. That damn competitive ranking system. Izuku said under his breath. So many problems would be gone if they cared more about doing the right thing than their stupid, worthless rank. He mumbled to himself. Also, the man never keeps what he steals. Naomasa finished. He returns it? The man nodded. Well then, I think this one is pretty straightforward. How so? The detective questioned. He's clearly just doing this for attention. His actions are screaming. Notice me. See me. Look at me. Izuku would have laughed if it wasn't so pathetic. He doesn't seem dangerous anyway. He'll slip up eventually, and then you can catch him and his partner. His partner? Naomasa raised a brow at that deduction. Someone's obviously operating the camera. Izuku shrugged. Just have a low-level hero or officer keep an eye on this gentle criminal case and it should be fine. He advised. He doesn't even seem dangerous anyway. Well, thank you for your input. Detective Naomasa closed his notepad and stood up. You're welcome. Izuku also stood up to see him out. It was a pleasure meeting you. If you ever need anything, feel free to stop by the office anytime. The detective nodded and then left the room without another word. Green eyes watching him leave until he passed the door's threshold. Naomasa walked through the city headquarters of the HRD. He silently observed the various employees going about, mixed in with robotic drones that handled security, maintenance, and menial tasks. Midoriya hired a lot of quirkless individuals. He didn't discriminate against those with quirks, but he made those without a quirk who couldn't get a job despite their qualifications due to bias, a top priority when staffing the building. This decision gave Midoriya even more positive publicity and added to the growing list of people who sympathized with his cause. The detective never met the real Izuku Midoriya in person until now. Based off his initial impression when meeting the boy privately, he thought that he wasn't all that bad. He hated what he did to his friend Toshinori, but Midoriya seemed very pleasant, dare he say even a bit charming and engaging. He wasn't sure if that was all an act or perhaps real. His quirk only told him if people were telling the truth, not if they pretending to be someone they're not. It was then he remembered something Toshinori told him about Midoriya. He's just a boy who acquired too much power. A boy at the bottom of society who dreamed of being at the top. I can't fault him for that. Given the temptation, I probably would have ended up the same. He could agree with that much at least. Midoriya wasn't a terrible person, and after what he did to the symbol of peace, he had yet to do anything villainous. As far as he knew. Maybe everything he did was good after all. Naomasa thought as he passed by the tall robot dragging the unconscious hero through the lobby and out the front entrance. Back in his office, Izuku was going over a few reports that he left off of when Guillotine caught Drill Bit. There hadn't been an unworthy hero in a while. They had been cleaning up their acts ever since Izuku assumed his position of authority and made an example out of MT Lady, Uwabami, and Weather Dominator. Drill Bit required some investigation, but what ultimately sealed his fate was his own wife ratting him out. His personal phone rang, interrupting his work again. The hospital? Izuku hoped it was some good news. Hello? He answered. Director Midoriya. A doctor on the other end greeted. You told me to call you as soon as young Eri was stable. She's all right then? Izuku inquired. Oh yes. Just a case of quirk overuse. The doctor explained. I'll be there momentarily. He hung up. Without any more wait, Izuku abandoned his work at the desk and opened a portal to the hospital. Elsewhere. At the Night Eye Agency, a small service for the fallen hero was being held. It wasn't a large affair. Those in attendance included his sidekick Centipeder, Bubble Girl, and his only intern Mirio Togata. Ryukyu, Rocklock, and a few other heroes who participated in the raid also showed up. Erasure Head attended along with Tamaki and Nijire, who came to support their friend during the tragic loss of his mentor. Surprisingly, Midoriya didn't show up. He had no real reason to be there, but many still expected him to at least make an appearance considering his part he played in the operation. However, his so-called knights appeared in his stead. After the sidekick said a few things about Night Eye, Mirio got up and followed with a eulogy of his own. Aizawa watched Ida from across the room. He'd been told by Nizu after he deciphered the message that Ida was working an angle from inside of Midoriya's department. Rather than become furious that the young man was putting himself in severe danger again, he chose to look at it rationally. From what the public knew about Midoriya and his hero trainees, they were free to walk away from his program at any time. So the fact that Ida could leave if things got too hot, gave him a bit of comfort, and perhaps they could use the inside information to do something about limiting Midoriya's power. Ida met his gaze and looked to Todoroki and Uraraka, silently telling him not to approach and speak to him as those two could not be trusted. Aizawa gave him a discreet nod in understanding. While they were silently communicating, Centipeder and Bubble Girl brought Mirio Togata up to Sir Night Eye's office to have a private conversation. This is for you. The insect hero said as he handed a red-colored cell phone over to Mirio. Thanks, but I already have one. The blonde teen said gratefully. About 2 weeks ago Sir Night Eye received this in a package. Centipeder explained. There was no name, return address, or a message. The phone has no information, is untraceable, and can only connect to one other phone. I think you know who. All Might. Mirio realized. So this is how they plan to keep in contact. Yes. Bubble Girl confirmed. You put in a specific numerical password and it will connect you to All Might. I think you know the password that Sir chose. Mirio looked around at all the former number 1 heroes' merchandise that lay around Sir's office. All Might's debut date. He answered. Correct. We believe Sir Night Eye would have wanted you to have this. Centipeder told him. He would have trusted you the most to keep in contact with All Might and let him know what's going on over here. You can count on me. Mirio said enthusiastically. A ringing caught all three of them by surprise. They looked to the red phone, but it wasn't coming from that. Oh, that's mine. The blonde student took his normal phone from his pocket. Hello, this really isn't a good time. I apologize, this is East Hospital. You requested to be notified when the child Eri woke up. The doctor spoke. Oh, thank you. I'll head over there now. Mirio was glad to hear more good news on a day like this. That's fine. Director Midoriya is already here visiting her. The doctor said before hanging up. What? Lemillion paused in worry. His thoughts ran back to Sir's future vision and how it all hinged on Eri for some reason. All right. Thank you. He really needed to be there now. A sea of darkness filled her vision. Nothing, not a single star of light could be seen. In the midst of the silence, suddenly a voice could be heard. A gentle voice calling her name. The voice created warmth in the cold dark world. Suddenly light finally entered the world. Eri finally opened her eyes to see the green-haired Izuku Midoriya sitting by the foot of her bed with a friendly smile. "Good morning, Eri." "Well, technically it's afternoon, but that doesn't matter," he said with light amusement. "Do you need anything? Fluffier pillow? Glass of water?" Izuku asked rather awkwardly, not used to having to take care of someone in a hospital bed. Water. Eri vispered hoarseli. Her throat felt so dry. "Here." Izuku gently handed her a glass and she took a sip. Her ruby eyes landed on the gauntlet holding the glass. He noticed her staring. "Pretty, isn't it?" He waved at her with it while sitting the glass back on the table and then held his device out for her to get a better look. "I must apologize to you, Eri." Izuku spoke softly. "That first time we met, I could have saved you from that man. I should have just ignored the law and did what my gut instinct told me was the right thing to do, and for that I am truly and sincerely sorry." He bowed his head in shame. I didn't tell you the truth." Eri remembered how she wasn't honest with him when he asked her to be that day. "Yes, you lied." She flinched at Izuku's words, expecting to be scolded. "You lied because you were scared." "There's nothing wrong with being scared, Eri. I'm not mad at you for that. In fact, I'm not mad at you at all. I'm just relieved that you're okay." He smiled at her and reached out with his bare hand to pat her head. This girl, despite her fear, while in the middle of a battle of heroes and villains, gained the courage to reach her hand out towards him. One of the bravest things Izuku had ever seen. "Now then. I know you have to be hungry, Eri." He switched topics. "Whatever you want, name it and you'll have it." Izuku was fully prepared to grant whatever crazy request for food a child could want. "Apples?" Eri asked for shyly. The director of the HRD almost fell over at such a simple and easy request. "Your wish is my command." Izuku created a small portal off the side of the bed, by his knees, out of the little girl's sight. "Watch closely now." This was a little joke he sometimes did for Uraraka that always made her laugh. He reached into the portal which led directly to the food storage at HQ and grabbed an apple. "Tada!" He pulled it out, pretending like it was a magic trick. Eri's eyes widened and the sides of her lips twitched for a moment, almost curling into a smile, but failing. "Here you go." He also grabbed a knife and plate through the warp gate, quickly peeling the fruit and chopping it into small bits for a child to eat. "Do you like apples, Eri?" "Yes." Eri reached out, picked up a piece. She hesitated for a moment before taking a bite. Izuku smiled at her for eating. She ate a few more pieces before finally asking the question that had been on her mind. What happened to Chisaki? If he was still out there, he would probably come back for her. He always did. "You don't have to worry about Overhaul Every again." Izuku chuckled. "It seems he ran afoul with the League of Villains and won't be hurting you or anyone ever again." The media went with the story that he was killed by Tamura Shigaraki. All that was found at the site of the attack was Kai Chisaki's blood and a bit of ashes already passing into the wind. The police made the obvious conclusion, never knowing what really happened to him and whose hands he really died at, and that's how Izuku wanted it as far as anybody is concerned. "I don't understand." Eri looked at him curiously. "He's gone, Eri. He's gone forever," he said with finality. She finally got that he was dead and started to cry. "It's okay." Izuku comforted her, placing a gentle hand on her back. "Everything will be all right now." Izuku had a bit of experience comforting sad children from the times he visited Dr. Higurashi and the children under her care. Most of the time they just needed a hug. Eri slowly stopped crying and reached out to grab his gauntlet-covered hand for warmth, but flinched away when she felt the cold metal plating. "It's perfectly safe," Izuku said, showing her his device strapped to his arm. Eri stared at it in wonder, reaching out to touch it again, which he allowed. "This is what gives me all those special powers you saw, Eri." He smiled as he picked up the apple core with the reality stone and hovered it in his hand, then dropped it back on her plate. "You have a special power too, don't you?" "It's a curse." Eri looked away sadly. "Now what makes you think that?" Izuku asked with concern. He said it was a curse. That it was bad. That only he could use it. The little girl looked to be on the verge of tears again, remembering all the cruel things Overhaul said to her. "I should have killed him a few more times." The teen thought to himself. "Do you know what Kai Chisaki was?" "He was a bully." He started. "Bullies are awful people that will say and do anything to make themselves feel stronger, but in reality they are weak and scared." Chisaki was certainly weak and scared. The man begged for an end to his suffering over and over again in his last moments. And your power is not a curse. That was just a lie. But I made it joke. My dad, disappear. That made Izuku pause. He quickly figured out what most likely happened. Based off what he'd seen her quirk do, if applied enough to an individual it could probably rewind them to a point before they even existed. When her quirk first manifested, she wouldn't know how to control it or turn it off. Her father probably tried to come to her aid like any sensible parent would and then, poof. Izuku sighed sadly as his mind visualized the scenario. He sat on the bed next to Eri, placing his larger hand over hers. It wasn't your fault, Eri. No one can hold a child accountable for something beyond their control. Her tears started to slow. Let me show you something. Izuku stood from the bed and walked over to the window, opening it. That power I used to strike down Overhaul. The lightning I used came from a quirk. He activated that quirk and used it to create dark storm clouds in the distance over the city. This quirk can be used to do terrible things if I want. He made the rain fall next, black sparks dancing between his moving fingers. However, I can also use this quirk to do this. Izuku stopped the rain, parted the clouds and created a giant rainbow arching over the buildings. Does this power look like a curse? He asked with a playful smirk. Eri stopped crying, her eyes widened in surprise and awe at the beautiful display. From outside the hospital room a figure looked upon their interaction. Mirio watched Midoriya with a curious yet sharp gaze. He couldn't help but wonder just what the former villain known as Apotheosis was up to with this. Why did he seem so attached to Eri? What was the endgame here? So many questions he had yet to figure out. Mirio once again wished Sir was still alive, as he was so much better at figuring these kind of conundrums out. One thing he did know was that he had to use that red phone and get in contact with All Might as soon as possible. Let him know what happened and what his former sidekick saw in the future. Maybe they could prevent it. Maybe the future wasn't set in stone. Izuku sighed as he got out of his limousine. He stared up at the entrance of UA. With the threat he made to the principal after the fall of All Might, he honestly never expected to have to come here ever again. Izuku was surprised that they were even having a cultural festival. He thought that the commission would have shut that down because of the threat that the League of Villains still posed. That rat must have pulled some strings to get this. Izuku thought as he placed his sunglasses on. Why was he doing this again? He looked back into the seat of the car to see Eri in a red and white child's dress. That's right. That blonde fool Mirio Togata thought that this would be a good idea. The other day, after he explained to Eri how quirks were not a curse and showed her a demonstration, the hero Lemillion decided to step inside and make his introduction. Eri seemed pleased to see the person who almost died trying to save her was safe, but had yet to show a truly positive show of emotions. Mirio was also glad that she was safe. After greeting her, the poor fool attempted to get the young girl to smile. He said that they all wanted to see her safe and smiling again. Much to both Izuku and Togata's shock, they found that Eri had forgotten how to smile. Izuku didn't hold any hard feelings for Mirio. In fact, he found the older boy to be quite admirable and heroic. However, his idea to bring Eri to UA's cultural festival in attempt to cheer her up, give her back some of the childhood she missed thanks to Chisaki, while with the best intentions, Izuku felt might be a mistake. They just got Eri out of an awful environment. He didn't think surrounding her with more people that Izuku knew he couldn't completely trust, was such a good idea. Unfortunately, that look on her face when Mirio explained all the cool things that would be at the festival. That look of curiosity and hope was not something the Gauntlet user could deny. A few phone calls later, Midoriya and Eri were given permission to attend at Mirio's request. Izuku also made sure to get permission for a few extra guests as well. He didn't want to have to attend this thing alone. All right, Eri. We're here. Izuku held his hand out for her to take. Eri took his hand and quietly followed him up to the school's entrance. Another limo pulled up and out stepped Ochako aka Angel, dressed in a white long-sleeved shirt, sleeves rolled up, black plants and shoes. Sorry I'm late. She apologized. Uraraka wanted to have lunch with her parents that day, but also wanted to come with Izuku and Eri later. Something about saying hello to her friends. Actually, you're right on time. Izuku was glad that she made it. Todoroki didn't have any friends at UA and wanted to spend time training with Dabi, much to the pyromaniac's displeasure. Ida also wanted to train on that new treadmill that Mei Hatsum designed and built for him, so he elected to stay back at the base as well. Hi, you must be Eri. Uraraka smiled down at the little girl who hid behind the green-haired boy's leg. She's a little shy. Izuku surmised. This is a very good friend of mine, Eri, she won't hurt you. Ashiru. Eri stuttered out, taking a brave step out from behind him. Nice to meet you too. You can call me Ochako? She then turned her attention to the older boy. You know you didn't have to dress so formally. Unlike Izuku, the brown-haired girl was dressed casually. I like the suit. He replied with a shrug. Come here. Uraraka walked right into his personal space and undid his poorly done tie, loosening the top button before tossing it into the back seat of the limo. Eri watched the whole interaction curiously. Even a girl as young as her wondered if they were more than friends. There, that's better. Ahem. The sound of someone clearing their throat interrupted them. All three of them turned to see Shota Aizawa standing there at the entrance with the pro-hero's hound dog and ectoplasm standing behind him. If you two are done, we can perform the security check. By all means, go right ahead. Izuku stared back him with an equally disinterested glare. Ectoplasm stepped towards the group with a handheld metal detector. He did a sweep over all three of them. Checking for weapons? He raised a brow at that. How ridiculous. As if I would carry a gun or a bomb when I have the most powerful weapon in the world strapped to my left arm. He chuckled at U.A for their overly cautious methods. Speaking of which, we're going to ask for you to leave that with us. Hound Dog growled out, gesturing towards his gauntlet. Izuku took a few dangerous steps towards the towering hero. Aizawa nearly whipped out his capture scarf at the intimidating aura that Midoriya gave off. Sure. Izuku finally spoke, giving a friendly smile. Uraraka along with the three teachers' eyes widened in shock as he reached for his Infinity Gauntlet as if to take it off. Oh wait. He stopped. Would you also like me to give you my main base's secret access codes, or perhaps the location of the Titan shutdown system? Izuku spoke with the thickest of sarcasm. Get real. He mockingly smacked Hound Dog on the arm as he walked past the beastly hero. Eri quickly followed, wanting to stay close to him. Uraraka gave her former teachers an apologetic smile as she passed, trailing behind the two. Aizawa wanted to say something, but they had other matters with securing the school grounds to attend to. Plus he knew Midoriya wouldn't start any trouble. He was only here for that child and nothing else. Hey, you guys made it. Mirio appeared to be waiting for them. Izuku approached the third year. The annoying security check aside. The gauntlet user rolled his eyes. Lead the way. You three are going to love this. Class 1A has been practicing all week. Mirio explained as they walked. The older boy led them to a small concert theater where many other U.A students were gathering. The four of them ended up somewhere in the middle of the crowd. With Mirio placing Eri on his shoulders so she could see better. Izuku silently watched as the room went dark and the curtains opened. The lights on stage came on revealing Class 1A, some holding instruments, others looked to be backup dancers of some sort. Personally he thought that the future heroes shouldn't be wasting time with such frivolity when they could be training, improving, and honing their skills. All that talk about going beyond, plus ultra, they said. Yet here they were playing around like they were a band. At least the other hero schools took things more seriously. He thought that, but when the show went on Izuku was honestly impressed by how entertaining it was. He actually had to resist waving his arms up like the rest of the crowd, he had too much dignity for that. However, Ochako and even Eri could participate as much as they wanted. He turned and watched Eri, who seemed anxious at first, but as the show continued she started to get into it. It was then that Izuku saw something miraculous. Eri's lips upturned into a smile. An actual honest-to-God smile. The most heartwarming smile he had ever seen. Even when Izuku saved her, even when he told her that Kai Chisaki was gone for good, she never once smiled. Caught up in all this excitement and positive energy that Class 1A was what finally did it. Izuku was truly grateful to the hero students for this. Maybe having a festival and concert was a good idea. Perhaps he misjudged things. Did you like the show, Eri? Mirio asked as he set her down on her feet. The show was over and the crowd began milling out talking about how awesome Class 1A was. It was amazing. Izuku, Ochako and Mirio smiled as the little girl went on a tangent about much fun she had. So what would you like to do next? Izuku asked as they left the area with the other students. He barely noticed the wide berth they were giving him. All of U.A knew who he was and what he could do and no one wanted to get on his radar. He could honestly care less though. They walked around the festival trying the various foods and playing some of the games. Much to Izuku's annoyance, Mirio Togata challenged him to the obstacle course. At first the gauntlet user turned him down, having nothing to prove. However, Mirio replied with some good-natured playful taunting. Izuku knew he didn't mean anything, but his instinctual reaction led him to 4 words. "Oh, it is on." Taking off the jacket of his suit, he handed it to Uraraka and rolled up the sleeves of his shirt. No quirks were allowed during the games, so Izuku couldn't rely on his gauntlet and Togata couldn't use permeation, so it was a contest of who was more athletic. Unfortunately, a third-year hero student proved to be much more adept physically. While Izuku wasn't a skinny pushover like he was in middle school, his own muscular body couldn't keep up with Mirio's larger, well-trained, more impressive one. At least he made the older boy work for that win, coming up just behind him at the end of the obstacle course. Eri seemed to enjoy the friendly competition, so his pride taking the hit was worth it. After that game they went on to see the show that Class 1B was putting on. Some poorly written mashed-together production based off multiple movie franchises. Ripping off Western cinema. How original. He thought to himself. Throughout their little performance Izuku kept having to suppress a snort at how ridiculous it was. There was a moment where he almost started laughing out loud, but was stopped when Ochako gave him a gentle elbow jab in the arm that conveyed the simple message, "Don't be rude." Though after the show even Mirio was silent for once, not knowing what to say. Eri seemed to like it, then again children don't know the difference between good and bad theater, so it was fine. After the beauty contest, the 4 of them went back to trying out the different games set up around the campus. Izuku stopped and turned when he felt Eri ceased moving. He noticed she was looking at something at one of the stands. Following her gaze, he saw that she was staring at a white stuffed unicorn, one of the prizes that the game offered. The little girl absent-mindedly reached for the small horn on her own head. "You like that?" Mirio blurted out, having also noticed what Eri was eyeing. "It has a horn like me," Eri said. She'd never seen a pony with a horn before. "Would you like one?" Izuku asked. He led her by the hand to the booth. It seemed to be a target shooting game run by a pair of students. "How do we win the unicorn?" he questioned the 2 boys. 5 tickets get you 5 shots. The first said. "Get 3 shots in a row, you get one of the lesser prizes, get all 5 in a row and you can get any prize you want." Simple enough. Izuku pulled out a rather large roll of tickets that he purchased at the entrance. All proceeds went to charity since the school already had more funding than they knew what to do with. He bought 1 roll for himself so he could do whatever Eri wanted, and he bought 1 for Uraraka for whatever game or show she wanted to participate in. "Would the top U-Data student like to go first?" Izuku asked with a smirk. "Sure." Mirio smiled back, confident to the challenge. Izuku handed him 5 tickets and stepped out of his way. "This will be a piece of cake, which we will have later after I win this." He tried to joke. Bad at jokes. Izuku mumbled under his breath. He watched as Mirio Togata easily got 4 out of 5 targets almost effortlessly. When he was about to get the last one, the green-haired teen very subtly used the reality stone on his gauntlet and with a single finger twitch just ever so slightly moved the dart off course, causing the older boy to miss the last shot. "Ah, that's a shame. No one saw that." No one but Uraraka, who silently narrowed her eyes at Izuku in a disapproving yet playful manner. "I know what you did." Her eyes conveyed. "What?" The gauntlet user noticed her look and mouthed the question. She said nothing, but gave him a look that told him not do that again. "Man. I was sure I had that." Mirio sighed dejectedly. "Let me give it a try." Izuku stepped forward, placing the tickets on the table. Looking at the targets and darts in his hand, his mind rapidly calculated how to get all 5. In a span of seconds he got all 5 targets. Mind over matter, brain versus brawn. Brain always wins. The gauntlet user smirked at his victory over Mirio. "I'll take the unicorn please." The student quickly got the prize and handed it to the director. Izuku passed it to Eri, noticing it was almost half the size of her body. The little girl smiled and cuddled the stuffed animal to her body. The adorable scene moved all 3 of them. Heart melting. That was all Izuku thought as he fought the urge to clutch his chest. After a while Ochako disappeared, having been pulled away by Mina Ashido to go hang out with her friends from UA. Mirio took Eri to go on a ride, leaving Izuku to take a break by himself. Despite being alone, he knew he was far from it. Every security camera and hero on staff was watching his every move, he deduced. He didn't care. Even if he wanted to cause a problem, they couldn't stop him either way. Not that he had any bad intentions. Green Eyes then spotted a head of gravity-defying purple hair, also sitting alone at a bench not too far from himself. He smirked at the familiar person and went to go join him. The boy noticed him approach and unlike all the other students didn't panic or stare with fear and apprehension. Shinso Hitoshi. A pleasure to see you again. Izuku greeted him. Director Midoriya. Shinso replied. I'm surprised you remember me. I remember every student I find interesting. Izuku sat down next to him without permission. I noticed that you weren't in either of the hero class little shows. They still haven't transferred you, I see. Shinso clenched his fist, taking a deep breath to calm himself. It was a sore subject, which Izuku could tell, so he decided to press further. Even after the sports festival? You made it farther than any of the general education students. Are they not even considering you? They are. The purple-haired boy corrected. Aizawa-sensei has been giving me some private lessons and the support studio is making me something to complement my quirk. Tell me more. Izuku leaned in, hungry for more information. The student with the brainwashing quirk went on to explain that Erasure Head was teaching him how to use a capture scarf, the same weapon that the underground hero wielded. He also told him about the voice-changing device to wear around his mouth the support class was working on that he requested. Izuku hummed to himself in thought. That's a very good start, but it's not enough. Not to sound rude, but what do you mean not enough? Shinso looked at him with tired eyes. As I said, you're looking in the right direction with that voice-changing device, but I think you should go even further. Izuku's brilliant mind already went through all the possibilities and potential that his brainwashing quirk could do. Don't waste time with such a complex capture weapon. You should focus more on trickery and deception like with the voice changer. Learn how to throw your voice like a ventriloquist. Tell nobody how your quirk works, not even your friends, colleagues or loved ones. You need to be like a magician and tell no one your secrets. Have disguises, alternate identities. You could be a dozen different heroes and nobody would know. Shinso's eyes widened at the long-winded analysis about how he should be using his quirk and the kind of hero he could be. How the hell? The general course student wondered where all this came from. Oh. I'm extremely good at quirk analysis. Izuku explained simply. I've been doing it since childhood and used this talent a lot during my time as a villain. Made quite a lot of money at it in fact. He thought it was funny that a skill ignored and underappreciated by heroes and civilians in society was in fact cherished and highly valued by villains. How ironic. Thank you for the tips, I guess. Contrary to his apathetic tone, he was enormously grateful for any advice he could get his hands on. He was already so far behind the hero students. Look. Aizawa is the homeroom teacher of Class 1A, so I'm guessing those private lessons don't happen as frequently as you like. Izuku spoke as he reached into the pocket of his jacket. If you want more focused training and state-of-the-art support items, come to the city office of my department. He handed the student his card. Tell them your name and that you know me. I'll personally arrange whatever you need. Shinso looked down at the card in his hand. Knights of Balance. The hero training program of the HRD. I'll think about. He sounded interested, but a bit hesitant. That's all I ask. Izuku smiled at him. Think about it, consider your options and come to me if you decided you want more than what this school can do for you. I see a lot of potential in you, Shinso Hitoshi, and would like nothing more than for you to properly flourish and become all that you could be. With that he bid Shinso farewell and went to go catch up with Mirio and Eri. Later that evening after everything was over it was time to leave. Eri, despite her time here being over, was still smiling and happy. Don't forget your new friend. Izuku, using the reality stone, picked up the stuffed unicorn that she dropped and made it trot over to the girl as if it was alive. Eri grabbed her precious gift and held it close so as to not drop it again. Thank you, Togata. This was a real treat and I'm glad you suggested it. The gauntlet user held his right hand out for him to shake. Mirio was never intimidated by Midoriya like many others, so he eagerly took the offered hand, returning the gesture. You're welcome. Mirio beamed at him. This only further proved his belief that there was good inside Izuku Midoriya. He wasn't all just dark ambitions and cruel intentions like everyone thought. Maybe that future Sir Saw could be prevented after all. There didn't have to be a battle. Elsewhere. About a mile from the city office of the HRD. In a dark, dank alley a windowless van sat parked in the shadows. The vehicle stayed unseen and unnoticed by the city around it. The security is tight. The voice of a young girl spoke from within, the clacking of a keyboard following her words. The system is almost impenetrable. Almost? The voice of an older man said. Yes, there is a window of opportunity. The girl explained. We'll only get one attempt, so we'll have to pick the right moment. Well done, my dear. The man praised. We can infiltrate the department office and escape without Director Midoriya being none the wiser. Are you sure this is a good idea, Gentle? The girl didn't sound too on board with this plan. Director Midoriya and his department was not someone to be trifled with. Of course, La Brava, he said enthusiastically. We're about to attempt something that even the bravest villains wouldn't dare try. After this our names will go down in history. The man theatrically proclaimed. He was so sure of his success. So Kurogiri was captured then? Izuku smiled as he heard the report through his phone. The commission didn't supply him with info he didn't need to know in their eyes, but his informants in the police were so eager to please. Even though this was good news for society, it secretly annoyed him that the warping bartender was arrested. He really needed the League to exist for a bit longer, and without their escape, their moves will be severely limited. Thank you. He switched off his phone. Now where were we? He looked over at Stain, who stood frozen in mid-attack covered in a blue stasis aura. I know we are training, but if you had just let me answer the phone I wouldn't have had to lock you in space. Izuku smirked. Releasing the power of the space stone, he freed the hero killer from his control. The man wasted no time and attacking him immediately with his sword. Izuku forced him to back off by creating a wall of flames with Endeavor's stolen quirk. I thought you wanted a simple exercise. Stain mocked as he evaded the flame. I'm sorry, am I pushing you too hard? Izuku replied with a smirk. The killer charged towards him, dodging fireballs. The gauntlet user levitated himself into the air. Getting some distance from the man's blade, he pointed his right hand at him and activated 2 quirks of the Soul Stone. A large mass of crystals extended out from his limb, nearly burying the hero killer. What the hell? Stain dodged the sudden attack. It covered so much area that it was extremely difficult to evade even in the large open training room. Izuku retracted it and then extended it again. Cristal plus overgroot. The boy supplied. What a wonderful combination. Or at least it was until the killer started hacking away at it with his sword, shaving pieces off with each swing. Izuku tried strengthening it with the Power Stone, but One for All refused to cooperate yet again. This had been happening more frequently lately, and he still had yet to isolate the problem. One thing he did finally conclude was that this glitch only happened when he combined the Soul and Power Stones together. Drill plus Gigantification plus Hell Flame. In an instant the crystals retracted into Izuku's body and his entire right arm transformed into a large flaming drill. He met Stain's charge with his now weaponized appendage. The man's sword bounced off his fire-clad drill. Izuku just smirked at him and pointed his gauntlet to the left. Vector. Using the copied power of All for One again, he launched Stain to the left. Izuku ignored the bit of blood that dripped from his nose as he pressed his attack, turning his weapon towards the killer. Stain found himself backed against the wall of the training room with a giant flaming drill inches from his face. I win. The man glared while the teen smirked. Of course you won. Stain spat. Nobody can match up to that kind of power. Not to sound rude, but that was the point. Izuku replied. So what's the point of training then? You don't even need it anymore. The killer questioned. I like to keep my skills sharp. Izuku just shrugged as he deactivated the quirks, returning his arm to normal and wiping the trail of blood running out of his nose. 3 quirks, the brief use of the 4th one nearly pushed the overload. He noted. Using too many quirks with the Soul Stone at one time always carried risk. Anyway. That's enough for today. I need to get ready. You're still going to that damn hero ranking event. Stain growled out distastefully. I don't like it either. Izuku agreed with him. If it were up to me I'd abolish the whole thing. However, I don't have the political pull to do that, for now. He was practically being forced to attend this event by the Prime Minister. Toriyama knew how much he disliked the hero ranking system, so he made a point in saying that as the director of the HRD he was obligated to attend. A small bit of petty revenge for what Midoriya pulled to get where he was now, he was sure. One more thing, Stain. Izuku paused and looked to his loyal shadow. After you're finished tracking down the rest of the trigger supplies, I want you to look into this Meta Liberation Army. He explained the next covert assignment. I just want to know where they are and what they hope to accomplish. I've heard of them. Stain remarked as he collected his blades from the training room floor. Some cult-like organization. Of sorts. Izuku looked away. I was never interested in them back when I was Apotheosis, but based off some of the things I've heard, I want to know if they might become a potential annoyance in the future. The hero killer just stared at him for a bit, then nodded in acceptance of his mission. Elsewhere, Ida frowned as he walked past the tall, imposing Titan robot that guarded the entrance to his family home. One of the handful assigned to patrol the area and protect his family. These soulless metal machines were supposed to be the replacements to what Midoriya believed were false heroes. Walking into the house, the boy saw his brother in a wheelchair waiting for him. Tensei was receiving the treatment that Midoriya promised. The bionic exoskeleton still required a lot of adjustments and physical therapy before the former hero would be able to properly walk again. "Tenya," his brother greeted. "Tensei," he responded back. "It's good to see you." "You too." Tensei smiled at him. "Everyone else is out. Come on, let's talk. I've not seen you in quite a while." He wheeled himself towards the living room and Tenya followed him. "So how are things at the HRD? Training is going well." Tenya responded dispassionately. "Director Midoriya wants to send us on trial patrol soon." "How are things really going?" Tensei now wanted his honest answer. "I don't." He looked at his brother seriously. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do anymore." Tenya sighed. "I don't believe that Midoriya is evil, but I know he's doing something behind the scenes that he's not telling us." "Like what?" Tensei asked. "The villains that he has working for him are out there doing who knows what." Tenya answered with concern. "His information doesn't just come from nowhere. The only reason I joined his organization in the first place was so I could get inside and find out his secrets and hopefully put a stop to him and whatever he's planning." "Tenya, I personally think Midoriya is not the villain that people are making him out to be." He told the younger boy honestly. "Yes, he did a lot of bad things to get where he was that I can't agree with. However, his department has done a lot of good for society." "You haven't seen what I've seen though. You don't know the real danger he poses to society." Tenya argued. "I've seen the good he's done as well, but there is a dark side to his organization. He's ruined the lives of any who defy or don't agree with him. He's blackmailed and extorted people to get more political power and influence." He shivered a bit at the memory of the few things he did find out. "I'm scared of what will happen if this continues. All that power shouldn't be in the hands of someone as morally ambiguous as Midoriya. That's why I think we need to stop him soon before it's too late." "Well, I can't help you with that, but there's someone here who can." A knock at the living room door preceded his words. "Come in." The door opened, revealing the underground pro hero and former teacher to Tenya, Ida. "Aizawa-sensei." The engine quirk boy was surprised to see the man here. "Ida, it's good to you safe," Aizawa told him. "Sorry about the sudden visit, but it was the only way to meet with you without Midoriya knowing. He had to camp out all night outside and wait for a window in the Titan's patrols to slip inside." Tensei explained. "Nizu decrypted your message," Aizawa explained. "So what do you got for us?" Tenya Ida nodded and went on to explain everything he was able to find out while inside the department. "The masked agent. It is the hero killer Stain," he confirmed with anger in his eyes. Ida despised having to train and work alongside the man who put his brother in a wheelchair in the first place. "There are two more though. Dabi and Himiko Toga are also part of this. Weren't those two part of the League of Villains? Why are they working for Midoriya?" the underground hero questioned. "As far as I know, Dabi doesn't have anything to do with the League anymore and exclusively answers to Midoriya. Himiko Toga, on the other hand, seems to be still affiliated with them and is acting as a go-between," Tenya explained. "So he's still in contact with the League. That's concerning." Aizawa frowned in thought at the potential implications. "There's one more thing," Ida began. "That special project. The one that All Might fought and defeated on the day of his fall. Hatsum and Midoriya have made a new and improved one and are planning to release it in a few days." "Nemesis," Aizawa said solemnly. The fact that the original machine lasted as long as it did against the number one hero was shocking and impressive. He couldn't imagine what the new version would be like. That thing was going to be released to the public. Later that evening, Izuku sighed as he watched the top 10 heroes parade themselves on stage. Each of them gave a little statement which he barely paid any attention to. Until it was Hawk's turn. "Wow, I never thought I'd ever make it to the number one spot," the winged hero announced. "You only got that spot because All Might and Endeavor are out of the picture," Izuku thought to himself as he continued to observe. "We've been through a lot, haven't we?" The whole hero profession got shook up. Hawk's eyes landed on Midoriya up in his personal skybox above the crowd. Izuku met his gaze with his own piercing one. We got a new government department the same day we lost our original number 2 hero. Speaking of our new department director, I would just like to say. The Gauntlet user leaned in eager to hear what the man had to say about him. His changes to our society and system have done wonders for everyone. The heroes in the audience were honestly surprised by his words, and even Izuku was not expecting him to say that. I would just like to thank him for everything. I'm glad we can all live a little easier with him watching over us. Interesting. Izuku thought as he watched the new number 1 hero end his little speech. After the hero billboard was finished, the top 10 heroes were invited to the upstairs lounge area to mingle with each other. While they talked, they were interrupted when the door opened, revealing Director Midoriya himself. The entire room went silent as green eyes landed on each and every one of them, lingering a bit on Hawks until they moved on, landing right on the rabbit hero Mirko. He slowly approached her, making everyone, including her, tense up. Hawks watched and his feathers almost flinched when Midoriya reached into his suit pocket. "Hello, Mirko. Would it be too much trouble?" He pulled out a small notebook with a pen between the pages. "To ask for an autograph." "Huh." The rabbit hero was taken aback. "Are you for real?" This seemed hard to believe. "This is embarrassing." Izuku flushed a bit as he rubbed the back of his head. "You were always one of my favorite heroes. I always wanted to meet you and ask for your signature. If you wouldn't mind." "Okay?" Mirko sounded skeptical but decided to comply. She couldn't exactly refuse someone who had the same level of authority as the commission president. "You put bunny ears on the M, I like that." Izuku chuckled as he examined her signature. "I'll always treasure this, thank you." That was weird as shit. Mirko thought to herself, but didn't say it aloud. The Gauntlet user pocketed his notepad and left her there dumbfounded. He then approached Hawks next. "Let me guess. You also want an autograph from me too?" he said smoothly with a smirk on his face. "Oh no. You too flashy for my tastes." Izuku was brutally honest. "You're an alright hero though. Alright enough to be the new number 1 hero." Kigo argued. "You do realize the only reason you have the spot is because I removed All Might and Endeavor." Izuku reminded him. "And I would like to thank you for that." Hawks once again tried sucking up to him as much as it disgusted him. He then remembered what the president of the commission told him to do. "While you're attempting to infiltrate the League of Villains, you also need to pretend to be on Midoriya's side. We believe he's still in contact with them, we just need evidence. You need to get that evidence. If he thinks you agree with him, you just might be able to slip under his radar. Enjoy it while it lasts." Izuku said under his breath, but Hawks caught it. What's that supposed to mean? The hero couldn't help but wonder. He really needed to get closer to the League. The sooner he could get some concrete proof that Midoriya was still working with villains, the sooner they could bring him down. "Excuse me." Izuku noticed his personal phone was vibrating, so he pulled it out and looked at it. "Trouble?" Hawks asked with a raised brow. "No, just a glitch." The Gauntlet user pocketed his phone. "So do you mind if I asked you a bit about your quirk?" "Sure, what do you want to know?" Hawks said in a fake friendly demeanor. HRD City Office. While Midoriya was away at the evening's event, the office was closed down. All employees had left and not a single individual was inside the building. There weren't even any nighttime security. It was all automated and handled by machines. The entire building was locked tight. "Almost. 3, 2, 1, now." A short girl whispered. One of the large metal doors to the loading bay opened up just big enough for an adult human body to slip through. "Hurry, Gentle." An older man quickly ran through the opening, followed by his younger sidekick. "We did it, La Brava." The man known as Gentle Criminal proclaimed proudly. "Your wonderful skills have allowed us to infiltrate directly into the heart of the Hero Regulation Department. It wasn't all me. I just spotted a hole in the security system." La Brava blushed at his praise. Having the door open just a crack and rigging it to register as a glitch and not a break-in won't set off the alarms wasn't that difficult. The two of them strolled through the rather large loading bay. "Now where are we?" he asked, looking around. "It's a loading area for something." La Brava explained. "I think this where the robots come and go." The two of them approached what looked like a wall-less elevator, big enough for 20 large men. "And where does this go, I wonder?" Danjuro asked aloud. "I don't know." The short girl said. "We should go up to the offices like we planned, Gentle. And we will, La Brava, but first I must satisfy my curiosity." The two of them stepped on the lift. La Brava was worried about where this would lead while Gentle Criminal was excited to explore and uncover whatever secrets Director Midoriya had hidden down here. The man pressed the only button on the panel and the elevator activated, lowering them down into the sublevel beneath the building. The elevator stopped, revealing a dark corridor. Taking a brave step forward, Gentle was nearly startled when the automatic light system came on, revealing the only available path. "Just a quick peek and we'll go back upstairs and film our shots," he promised. La Brava followed him down the hall. They found themselves in front of a large metal door. "Oh well, I guess we have." She was interrupted when the door also opened automatically. And here she was hoping that it was locked so they could go back. The two criminals entered and walked along what appeared to be a wide metal grated catwalk. Looking over the edge, they spotted something surprising. Legions of Titan robots lined up in many, many rows. Most were the standard black ones, but some were colored red, yellow, green, blue, gray, and white. There was even a troop with what looked like transparent armor and white inner mechanics. "This must be where they store the robots," the young lady said with some trepidation. "Gentle, we should go now. La Brava, get the camera out. We'll film our video here." Gentle ignored her worries, eager to make what would soon be his greatest achievement. La Brava did as she was asked, retrieving the video camera from her bag. "We're rolling," she said quietly. "Good evening, my most wonderful viewers." Gentle smiled. "Take a good look." La Brava shifted the camera to view the deactivated robots down below. "We have successfully infiltrated the Hero Regulation Department." He began walking further along the catwalk as he talked. Not a single villain in today's society would dare attempt this for fear of being caught and having their quirk taken away by Midoriya himself. The man spoke dramatically. "I, Gentle Criminal, have no such fear. With my talents and the help of my wonderful assistant, I shall make my escape, and Midoriya will be none the wiser that his base of operations was broken into." He thought about the publicity, internet popularity that this would net him. How his views and subscribers would go through the roof when this was posted. "Now, shall we?" He stopped when he approached a large round platform with 3 more catwalks connecting to it. In the center, a cylindrical metal pod, obviously hiding something inside. The whole thing just screamed important. "Is there a way to open this? I want to see what's inside." "Gee, Gentle, I don't think we should be messing with that." La Brava tried to protest. "Aha!" Gentle found a button. Without hesitation or knowing what it did, he pressed it. Several red lights began flashing as the cylinder raised up. A cold mist spilled out from the pod, chilling the very air around the two criminals as it touched their skin. When it cleared, they finally got a good look at what was stored within the pod. A Titan robot unlike any of the others down below. This one was easily bigger, and covered in gold armor. The head held a vaguely human-shaped face with 2 eyes, a slit where the mouth should be, and long triangular plates on the sides of the head almost resembling horns. "What is this?" Danjuro carefully examined the tall hulking robot. "I think this is the new nemesis. La Bravarielas. Director Midoriya promised a new one soon, after All Might defeated the first version. So this is the new symbol of balance that Midoriya made. The new advanced anti-villain robot. The only one of its kind. This machine looked powerful and very intimidating. I think we should go now." Finally realizing that they had stayed too long, Gentle thought now would be a good time to make a break for it. "Let's just film our escape." The two of them left the robot, eager to return to the elevator and leave this place before they got caught. While they had their backs turned away from the golden machine, they didn't notice the eyes suddenly light up an eerie blue. Gentle Criminal and La Brava were halfway across the catwalk when suddenly an oversized metal hand grabbed the man from behind and threw him back the way they came. "Gentle!" she screamed as he crashed into the metal railing. La Brava froze when Nemesis turned its sights on her next. The camera shook in her hands as she stared up in fear at this thing towering over her. From the machine's point of view, it was rapidly scanning her as it had already determined that she was with the villain, and now it was seeing if she was a threat. The computer came up negative in that regard all in a second. "Stay back," Nemesis warned. Its voice was deep and metallic. It turned away from her and stomped towards Gentle Criminal. The man grunted in pain as he stood up from where he was thrown. He looked just in time to see the robot charging towards him. On instinct, he used his quirk to create a rubber wall in the air between them. The armored machine's fist stretched the barrier and pulled back when it deduced what had happened. Gentle then bounced over Nemesis after turning the metal grating beneath him into rubber, landing safely next to La Brava. "We need to run, my dear," he shouted. The two of them turned tail and fled the way they came in. Emitter type. Air and surfaces, gain elastic qualities. Nemesis spoke again. The quirk analyzing AI that Izuku programmed into it gave it the ability to rapidly understand quirks based off the information it sees and experiences. A piece of its shoulder armor opened, revealing a cannon that immediately fired at the retreating villains, launching a football-sized capsule. Gently rebound. Gentle created another rubber transparent wall to deflect the attack and continued to run. The capsule bounced off and exploded into a mess of Midoriya's patented trap foam. Long-range attacks, ineffective. Nemesis growled out as he started to run towards them. The robot leaped over the elastic wall and made a line straight for the gentle criminal and La Brava. "Get through the door!" she yelled as they passed through the metal doors that led them to the Titan storage room. La Brava spotted a button that looked like a closing mechanism and pushed it. Luckily it was, and the doors started to shut on their pursuer. Unfortunately, as Nemesis reached the closing doors, its big metal hands reached between the closing gap, gripped the edges and proceeded to pry the doors open with surprising strength. The metal groaned as sparks flew out, most likely damaging the door mechanisms. "We're almost there." Gentle picked up his partner, used his quirk to bounce across the floor and get some distance. They reached the lift that took them down here in the first place and hit the button to take them back up. Nemesis reached the shaft as they escaped and stared up as the ascending lift. Exhaust flames emerged from its feet and back, launching it up into the air after its prey. The two villains stepped off the elevator just as the robot crashed through it with a mighty punch. Gentle Criminal and La Brava ran for the exit. The small girl pulled out her portable computer and tried to hack the door like she did before. It opened just a bit for them to escape and not trip the alarm. However, a capsule was launched between them that exploded and covered the exit in trap foam. The two stopped and turned around to face the machine that prowled towards them. "What do we do?" La Brava panicked. "We have no option now." Danjuro resolved himself. "We have to fight." But Gentle. Director Midoriya said that this thing was designed to fight some of the stronger villains. As much as she loved and respected him, she was aware of the reality that he wasn't physically a top-tier villain. "Yes, but I doubt it was designed to fight me," he proclaimed proudly as he approached the robot with renewed courage. "Surrender yourself, villain," Nemesis demanded as he stood over him, making an intimidating form. "Sorry, robot, but I have a dream to accomplish and I can't do that if I'm behind bars." Gentle Criminal leaped into action just as the machine made to grab him. Using his quirk, he ricocheted off of the floor, ceiling and walls of the loading bay, bouncing circles around the robot looking for an opening. Nemesis easily calculated his trajectory in a matter of seconds and close-lined him out of the air with its arm. "Gentle!" La Brava shouted for her friend as the robot stomped over to the man's fallen body and roughly placed its large metal foot on his back, pinning him to the floor. He tried to get up, but Nemesis just pressed his foot harder to keep him down. "Resistance is useless," the robot stated as it produced a pair of cuffs from a compartment on its leg. "Not completely useless." Gentle grimaced as he looked over to his partner in crime. "Gentle!" La Brava cried as she watched him be manhandled by the autonomous machine. "I love you," she proclaimed loudly. As she said that, a pink aura surrounded the body of Gentle Criminal. With the dramatic strength increase, he stood up, throwing Nemesis off of him. The gold-armored robot was not deterred. He merely applied the new information into its strategy. It quickly calculated that the girl that it originally deemed a non-threat was the source of this increase of power and turned to target her. Its arm transformed into a cannon, which it immediately fired a blast of compressed air. "Look out, my dear." Gentle speedily scooped her up and dodged the blast. He maneuvered around several more blasts, using his quirk to deflect a few when he needed to, all while protectively carrying La Brava in his arm. Danjuro closed in on the robot and delivered a powerful punch to its face. The head was only turned a few degrees to the right. Nemesis simply turned his head back and continued its assault. "Gentle, we can't win this," she told him, seeing that her love quirk wasn't enough to defeat this mechanical monster. "It seems you're right, La Brava," Gentle agreed. "So we'll have to make a grand escape. We need to get to upstairs," La Brava said as they evaded Nemesis' attempt to launch a capture net at them. "We can lose it in the offices and then escape through the main entrance," she whispered in his ear. "An excellent idea." Gentle smiled as they formulated the plan. He ducked a swipe from the robot's large arm, but was not expecting the kick powered by the engines in its feet. Luckily, he threw La Brava just in time so she wouldn't be hurt and took the full force of the kick. "Gah!" The man yelled in pain as he was knocked across the room and into a wall. Warning, further resistance will result in more forceful measures to ensure your capture. Nemesis somehow sounded even more threatening than before. It took a step towards the villain and nearly toppled over as its leg turned rubbery. The same leg that it used to kick the man. He must have used his quirk on the entire mechanical limb when they made contact. Let's go! Seeing the robot was momentarily slowed down, he sped past it and picked up La Brava while he was still under the effects of her quirk and made a line for the doors leading deeper into the building. They ran through what appeared to be a utility hall with various pipes running along the ceiling and walls. They felt relief when they spotted an employee elevator and quickly made their way to it. Their relief was short-lived when Nemesis rounded the corner they just passed, limping after them. They entered the elevator, however, as the doors closed, the robot used another of its new features. It reached out with its hand and from a distance managed to rip the doors right off with a magnetic energy beam emitting from its palm. That was close. The now doorless lift ascended upwards, escaping the persistent machine. They reached one of the office floors, finding themselves in a dark open room full of cubicles. With no other option, the two villains decided to hide among them. The elevator doors were ripped open as Nemesis forced his way through. Its head turned left and right, scanning the room for its prey. The robot began marching around the cubicles, its leg almost back to normal at this point. "Go that way," Gentle whispered as quietly as possible. Sadly not quiet enough, as Nemesis' sound-detecting scanner picked up on it and began rapidly tracking the source. The cubicle walls and employee desks didn't slow it down as it plowed through them all. "Run!" Gentle panicked as they took off through another door that he kicked open with his enhanced strength. Nemesis didn't even stop to duck down under the threshold, its head simply tore through the wall like it was paper as it continued to chase them. They made their way into a break room and more offices as they ran. "Where's the exit?" La Brava cried out. This place seemed like a maze. At least in all the twists and turns the robot lost their trail. Finally, after frantic searching, they found an emergency stairwell. Their luck ran out when several levels down Nemesis exploded through the wall, having figured out where they were going and decided to cut them off. It peered upwards, glowing blue eyes staring at them menacingly. To the roof. With the last of the strength La Brava's quirk granted him, he carried them up the stairs using his elasticity quirk to bounce off the walls, giving him more momentum. Nemesis strangely didn't follow them. It merely went back through the hole it made. "We made it!" Gentle exclaimed. He'd never had to work so hard to escape from somewhere before. As they opened the last door that led to the roof of the building, all their hopes were suddenly crushed in one fell swoop. "Well, this is quite a surprise. I certainly never expected this." There, standing in the center of the helipad, was the director of the HRD himself, Izuku Midoriya, in his immaculate gray suit, arms folded across his chest as he stared in amusement at the two intruders. "But how?" La Brava trembled as she held on to Gentle Criminal's leg. "I was so careful not to trip the security alert." "And you didn't, young lady." Izuku smiled at her. Nemesis, on the other hand. "Well, since he's not plugged into the Nexus, he's technically always active, and when he engaged you, his AI sent me a little message that an intruder had entered the building," he explained. "So I give you an up for bypassing the building security, but unfortunately you didn't know the robot could tattle on you now, did you?" He noticed them slowly inching their way to the edge of the roof. Speaking of whom, Nemesis suddenly appeared from over the edge near where they were standing, using its jets to hover in the air. Gentle and La Brava backed away in fright. The robot landed on the roof as they realized they were trapped. "Oh my. It looks like you two are stuck between a rock and a hard place." He brandished his Infinity Gauntlet, the stones glowing ominously. "Which one am I? The rock or the hard place, I wonder?" His grin widened even further. Gentle approached the opposite edge of the building and prepared to make his final attempt to escape. With his quirk they could easily jump to another building, and if they moved fast enough they just might be able to elude Midoriya and his robot. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Izuku said as he saw what they were about to attempt. "Well then, it's a good thing you're not me." Gentle smiled back. "La Brava. Hold on tight." She did as she was told and he leaped over the side of the building. They got only a couple of feet when a yellow bubble encased the entire roof and surrounding space around it, freezing them all in place, except for the one who cast it. "I told you." Izuku sighed after he activated the time stone. He levitated himself in front of them and simply waited for the effect to run out. Right when it did, he pointed his right hand at the criminal duo and channeled some of that stockpiled energy from the power stone. Once they were released, he flicked his finger at them, sending them flying back towards the roof and right into the waiting grasp of Nemesis. The machine grabbed the two of them with its big hands and forced them both to floor, pinning them both in place. Gentle didn't struggle, having accepted his loss. There really was no outwitting or outfighting Midoriya, so what was the point in resisting anymore? It seems his dream would die here. Villain capture complete. Nemesis said. Well done. Izuku clapped his hands together. This little break-in worked out great for the robot's first field test. He couldn't help but wonder how well Nemesis would do when it was soon released out in society. His future goals were getting closer to being fully realized. Interesting move. All for One smiled at Izuku. They were playing chess as they often did whenever he invited the teen to his lair to have discussions. Sensei's chess set was this marble gaudy thing where the white pieces were sculpted to look like angelic warriors while the opposing black side looked demonic and hideous. I heard Tamura is planning the attack on the U-Data training camp without you. I did the best I could when teaching him strategic planning, sir. Izuku said as he moved one of his white pawns forward. That you did. All for One moved one of his black knights to counter. Which is why I felt I should return the favor with a special lesson, just for you. What sort of lesson, Sensei? The boy tilted his head curiously. What do you know about manipulation? The ancient villain asked. Like getting people to do what you want? Or tricking them into making a move that benefits myself? Or forcing someone to follow your orders? There's blackmail. There's bribery. Izuku mumbled out loud as he stared at the board. I'm talking about control. How to truly rule people. All for One smirked. How do you think I amassed so many followers in my time? You told me that you offered to give and take quirks. Izuku remembered when he explained his quirk and a little bit of his history. The boy was quite shocked when the man told him that he was born during the dawn of quirks. Yes, but if you really think about it, there simply were not enough quirks to pass around at the time. So how did I get so many people in my corner? The thought did cross the boy's mind at one time or another. Sometimes all you need is to control one person. Izuku pondered what he meant. Allow me to illustrate. He picked his bishop and placed it around a group of his pawns. There's one fact I've come to understand about human behavior is that almost everyone in this world has someone, at least one, that they deeply care for. Someone who they'd go to any lengths to protect. That's true. Izuku thought to himself. Imagine these pawns care about this bishop. Sensei explained. Maybe their family, friends, co-workers, a loyal gang, you get the idea. He chuckled. I don't just give quirks to anybody. I look for people that have a following of their own. This bishop wants a quirk or wants someone else's quirk taken and will do anything I wish should I grant him his request. Now that I have the bishop, I have all the pawns. It's kind of like a pyramid scheme. Izuku noted. Exactly. All for One smiled wider as the boy understood. My point being is in the end all you really have to do is control a handful of people and through them you have an army. It's surprisingly easy. I'm sure with a quirk like yours it would be easy. The teen joked. You're right there. Alas, in a world without quirks All for One would be useless. Sensei quoted poetically. This is going to be your room, Eri. Dr. Higurashi said as he showed the little girl to where she would be staying. Eri looked around carrying her only possession, the large white stuffed unicorn that Izuku won for her during the U-Data festival. Go on, Eri. Izuku gestured for her to enter the room, assuring her that it was safe. The dark-haired doctor smiled as they entered the room. It was about the size of a dorm room. Thanks to Midoriya's generous donations they had more than enough funding and could afford to give the children each their own room. Izuku followed behind them as they entered. So many strings had to be pulled for this arrangement to be made. Blackmail had to be cashed in, social workers had to be paid off and a judge had to be bribed. Eri was technically a ward of the state. A ward that U.A adamantly wanted to take custody of. During the court hearing Izuku shut down that proposal very vocally. He explained that the League of Villains have targeted the hero school multiple times and that it was not safe for a young girl who couldn't control her quirk. Nizu and his legal team attempted to counter that argument, explaining that the school's security systems have been extensively upgraded. To which Izuku argued that Tamura Shigaraki had a personal vendetta against U.A and that it was only a matter of time before their new security was breached again. He also explained that during the interrogation of Kai Chisaki's underlings it was revealed that the League was working with them at the time for those quirk-erasing bullets. However, they only knew that the ingredients came from the body of child. They did not know the child's name or face. With all the attention Udote gets, it wouldn't take much for the villains put things together. Eri did not belong in that potentially dangerous environment. Izuku put his foot down on this topic. In the end, it was decided to keep Eri completely out of the media and that she would be placed under Dr. Higurashi in her child care center. The doctor was there during the hearing and fully supported Midoriya's arguments. She offered that her facility was well equipped to take care of Eri and that being around other children would do her some good, mentally and emotionally. However, a concession was made for UA. They'd be allowed visitation rights and Shota Aizawa was to attend all eventual quirk training, which Midoriya agreed to. "This is going to be your home from now on," Izuku told her. Eri turned and looked up at him with her big ruby eyes. "Why can't I live with you?" she asked hopefully. "Because Eri." He knelt down to her level. "I live on a military base out on the ocean. It's not a place for a young girl to live, trust me on this." "He's right," the doctor said. "Plus you'll be around other kids your age and be able to make plenty of friends here." She then looked towards Midoriya. "She's going to need some more clothes. I have people already on that," he assured her. Eri walked over and sat on the bed. Seeing her look a little dejected, Izuku walked over and sat next to her. "I'll come visit you a lot." He could easily guess what was on her mind. "In fact, if you ever want to talk or to see me, tell Dr. Higurashi and I'll be here right away." Izuku and the doctor stepped outside for a moment to give Eri more time to take in her room. "I want to thank you again for your support," the gauntlet user told her. "I really didn't want Udote taking custody of her. I'm sure you had your reasons for that." Higurashi shrugged. "But this works out well for both of us. I wanted to get the other children to interact with more people who have quirks. Having someone close to their ages will really help them grow accustomed." "When do you think we should begin helping her learn how to control her quirk?" Izuku asked. "Let her grow comfortable living here first. We need some ideas on how to help her practice though. After what you told me her quirk does." The doctor trailed off in thought. "I have some ideas," Izuku supplied. "Several ideas actually." Ever since he witnessed Eri's quirk firsthand, the more devious side of his mind ran through all the applications and uses for such a powerful ability. It took the rational and compassionate side of him to slap those ideas down and remind himself that she's just a child. "I want to help," he promised. "Are you sure you'll have time for this? I know how busy you get," Dr. Higurashi questioned. "I make my schedule, not the other way around." That was all he needed to say. If Eri needed him, he'd simply make time for her. Plus he planned on adding some new blood to his department to lighten the load on himself. "You're a good person, Midoriya." She left the director title out of his name. Higurashi didn't buy any of the slander that heroes, organizations, and politicians spread about Izuku. He did some bad things, but she truly believed that he was a good person at heart that just wanted what was best for everyone. Say that after Eri is living a normal happy life. He didn't feel like they were out of the woods yet in this case. Elsewhere, Danjuro Tabita sat alone in his cell. A sealed room without bars or windows with a vault-like door reminiscent of a maximum security prison. The room was also equipped with sensors that detected the usage of quirks, so he couldn't even attempt an escape without setting off the alarm. He had no idea what happened to La Brava. Midoriya had them taken to his base and placed in separate holding cells by his robots. He'd been here for over a week. The machines brought food and water to his cell regularly. He certainly hoped they were doing the same for his dear La Brava, wherever she was. "Please be alright, my dear." Being locked in here alone for so long gave him a lot of time to think. He realized the situation they were in was completely his fault. If they just stuck to the original plan. If he didn't let his curiosity and desire for fame get the better of him. The consequences of a life of infamy, I suppose. He lamented. The cell door suddenly opened, instead of the usual food hatch, and in stepped a tall black Titan robot. The machine with a few rigid moves hauled the man to his feet and placed a pair of cuffs over his hands that were meant to block the use of his quirk. It led him outside where 3 more robots were waiting. They formed a perimeter around Gentle Criminal and began walking. He got the message and walked with them. Not like he could resist anyway. He passed the large sealed door to the prison area of the base. It opened up just for them, shutting closed just as they passed. Gentle was led through several corridors until he was roughly shoved into a small room with a single metal table with 2 chairs on opposite ends. The door was slammed closed behind him, and with nothing else to do he quietly sat down in one of the chairs. After a few silent minutes the door opened again and there appeared Director Midoriya, smiling brightly as he walked into the interrogation room, carrying a file in his hand. Sorry to keep you waiting. Izuku apologized as he sat down in the opposite chair. He placed the file on the table and flipped it open. Let's see. He tapped his gauntlet-covered index finger on the metal surface as he skimmed through the information. Danjuro Tabita. He spoke the man's real name so casually. It took some digging, but we were able to put together a file for you. Nothing really all that noteworthy. Expelled from a low-level hero school for public quirk usage and interfering with hero work. After that it seems like a downward spiral to this. Izuku closed the folder and looked the villain in the eyes. Though I can't help but ask. What possessed you to break into my city office? He leaned forward for just a touch of intimidation. Danjuro remained silent. You can speak you mind. I won't get mad. I'm genuinely curious. The older man swallowed nervously and decided to come clean. In doing so he told Midoriya his whole story. How he became gentle criminal. How he met La Brava. His goals and his ambitions. There was no point in lying anyway. You know I understand on some level. I really do. Izuku told him honestly. Everyone wants to be remembered, be they hero or villain. He suddenly stood up from his chair, startling the criminal. Come with me, I want to show you something. The teen waved his gauntlet and Danjuro's cuffs were suddenly detached from his wrists. The door to the room opened and Izuku walked out while the older man followed behind. He didn't even try to escape, not without knowing where his beloved sidekick was. Where are we going? Gentle criminal wondered aloud. I just want to show you around. Izuku said simply. You got a little peek at the city office. I'm sure you'd appreciate a tour of the main base. He continued to lead him to another area of his headquarters, far away from the prison wing. Where is La Brava? He practically demanded. She's safe. Izuku's voice wasn't threatening. He didn't want this man to think he had harmed her or had plans to harm her later. I've already spoken to her. You'll get to see her soon. He turned and smiled back at him. She's a very bright person and cares a lot about you. Listen, Director Midoriya. Danjuro began. Everything we did was all my idea. La Brava had nothing to do with it. I forced her to work for me. He lied. That's funny. She said the exact opposite. His smile dropped as he turned and kept walking. She said it was all her idea. They eventually walked into a chamber that appeared to be some sort of observation room, with one large monitor screen that nearly took up an entire wall with a series of control consoles before it. On the screen was a brown-haired girl with metallic wings fighting against a taller boy with engines in his legs. They're using the training room again? I thought I told them to take a break. He sounded displeased but didn't make a move to correct this. At least they're improving. They watched them practice for a few minutes. When Midoriya decided it was enough, they left. He showed the captured villain around the main areas of the base. They even popped in on Hatsum in her workshop. Luckily nothing she was working on was going critical for once. Izuku ended the little tour, leading Gentle into an elevator. They didn't speak at all until the doors opened, revealing the outside. After you. The gauntlet user gestured for him to go first. They walked onto the helipad of the base. The captured villain's eyes strained at finally seeing sunlight after a week of imprisonment. When they adjusted, he was able to get a good look around. From their position, Danjuro could see the entire fortress and the ocean that surrounded it. Far off into the distance he could even see the city, but barely. He definitely couldn't swim that distance, so that escape was out. Have a seat. The villain was startled out of his thoughts by Midoriya's voice. He spun around to see him sitting by a small table where a fresh pot of tea and 2 cups were waiting. Black tea? Gentle knew what it was by the smell as soon as he sat down. A favorite of yours, I understand. Izuku commented as he poured them each some and politely took a sip. Gentle followed his lead. I like coming up here. I like staring at the clear sky. It's a gateway to a universe of endless possibilities. Do you want something from me? Is that why you're being so kind? The man asked. It seemed odd someone of Midoriya's station wasn't treating him like the criminal that he was. You're right, I do want something from you. Izuku said as he placed his cup down. I was going to build up to it, but since you decided to be so forward, I'll just cut right to the chase. He cleared his throat and smiled at the man. How would you like a job, Danjuro Tabita? A job? Gentle villain was struck by the question. Yes, a job. I'm talking about you working for me. Working as a part of the Hero Regulation Department. The gauntlet wearer explained so casually. I think you and your partner are quite skilled. It would be a shame to let such talents rot away in prison. Danjuro looked away and thought. You want to be remembered, right? Why not be remembered as part of the revolutionary change that created a new hero society, rather than a petty washed-up criminal? I'm not very strong or smart. I don't see what use you could possibly have for a washed-up criminal like me. He spoke dejectedly. You should give yourself more credit than that. Izuku argued. The fact that you lasted as long as you did against Nemesis is impressive. Besides, I'm not making this job offer based off strength alone. Both you and the girl were bold and determined enough to break into my city office. That shows guts. I like guts. The two of them sat in silence. One in thought, the other waiting for an answer. What would this job be? Tabita was curious now. The former villain known as Apotheosis smirked, seeing the man was seriously considering the offer. Mostly just security related. You and La Brava would be in charge of monitoring everything that goes on in the department, especially information, plugging leaks and all that. You would also have the run of the place whenever I'm not there. Employees will turn to you for things in my absence, so just compile a list organized by importance until I return. Izuku explained his possible future duties. That's what your normal job would be. Would you like to know your secret assignment? Seeing the older man raise an eyebrow, he continued. While you're working for me, I will give you the resources needed for you to dig up as much dirt as you can on the Hero Public Safety Commission. What? His eyes widened at what the boy just said. Going up against the commission was dangerous, but then again so was going against the HRD. Gentle could attest to that himself. I'll let you in on a little secret. One of my overall end goals is to eventually dismantle and ultimately absorb that whole government department into my own. Izuku picked his cup again and took another sip, finishing it off very greedily. The Prime Minister hacked off a good chunk of the Commission's authority and power when he created my department, but I want more than just a cup of tea. I want the whole pot. The teen smirked deviously. I was able to find a few dirty little secrets to get me this far, however we all know where there's one roach there's 100 more. The more secrets I have, the more ammo in my guns that will be aimed at the Commission, ready to fire when I give the order. This sounds risky. Danjuro tapped his fingers on the table in thought. Says the guy that broke into my robot storage and took on my symbol of balance. Izuku mused. Greatness comes with risks. Gentle paused. He'd said something similar like that before, to his companion. If I agree to this, I want assurances. The villain was seriously considering accepting this offer, but not just for himself. Let me guess, your partner. He already knew what he wanted. Izuku and La Brava already had a nice little chat. She and I have come to an arrangement. We're just waiting on you. Once again he was several steps ahead. We won't be sent to jail. Was the second concession Gentle criminal brought up. Considering you'd be in a police station cell instead of mine if I didn't see potential in you. Izuku chuckled darkly, but ultimately agreed. Done. My criminal record wiped clean. Danjuro Tabita made his third demand. For myself and my dear La Brava. Not a problem, but if you two break the law again I won't be able to protect you. The Gauntlet user warned. You work for me now and the new hero society. I don't think that will be a problem anymore. The man smiled. His glory days of robbing stores and trespassing were behind him now. It was time for a new chapter in his life. I guess you have yourself a new dedicated employee then. Maybe he could make a difference like he wanted to do when he was at the Hero Academy. Great. Izuku suddenly stood up. He waved his hand and opened a portal in front of him. Cool me. Let me show you where you two will be working. Danjuro stood up and followed him through the gaping warp gate. Looking around he noticed he was back in the city office that he broke in over a week ago. Instead of the empty dark halls and rooms it was well lit and bustling with employees. Many of whom smiled and greeted Midoriya with respect as they passed by. There's one thing I still don't understand. Why would you offer me this? Gentle finally asked the question that had been plaguing him as they walked. Call it an investment if you want. Or maybe I just don't like to see talent wasted. Especially talent that the old society rejected. Izuku answered, referring to how his genius and talent for quirk analysis was basically ignored for most of his life. Plus I feel I owe you both. Not only did you find a hole in my security system, you also helped put Nemesis to the test, and because of that I spotted a few glitches and kinks we can patch out before we send him out into the world. He paused and turned to stare at him with steel green eyes. Don't misunderstand my generosity though. You two will be heavily monitored and tracked at every turn. I will not be giving you any second chances beyond this one. Step 1 foot out of line and that will be it. That threat was very real and Danjuro got the message loud and clear. And here we are. Izuku stopped walking when they reached the office. Good morning. He pushed open the door, revealing La Brava sitting at the desk already at work on the computer. Cup of steaming tea placed above the scattered papers. La Brava. Danjuro shouted as he ran over to her. Gentle. She also exclaimed her joy at seeing him safe. The two of them hugged. Being separated for over a week was simply too long. She's been busy beefing up the security system and patching up the hole she used to break in. Izuku supplied. Gentle didn't notice that his companion wouldn't meet the teen's eyes. La Brava just continued to stare at the floor. Here are your options, Missy. Either you two end up working for me or you both go to prison, quirkless might I add. That's it. Look, I don't want to be the bad guy here. I don't want to see you two just tossed aside like every other criminal in this society. I know you deeply care for him, so why not do this for him? You can look at that way if you like. That was the deal Midoriya and La Brava came to. She didn't like it, but she was smart enough to know that it was the best deal they were going to get. I'll make this orientation short. The Gauntlet user began. Your schedule will be sent to your computer. You will both be given a full access pass to this building. How will this go with the media? Danjuro asked. Public image was important to Director Midoriya and his department. The official story is that you two turned yourselves in. You came to my office and surrendered personally to me. Izuku smirked as he fabricated the lie. I was so impressed by your talents that I offered you a position. That part was true at least. On the record you're both on probation. Off the record you will always be monitored but are essentially free to go. He smiled pleasantly. Also your new living arrangements. He fished a set of keys from his pocket, which he tossed to the former villain. I originally offered this new apartment to my mother but she turned it down, so it's yours. Gentle read the address on the tag and was shocked. He knew that area. It was very high class and well off. A place he never dreamed that he would get to live. Thank you, Director Midoriya. Danjuro Tabita bowed respectfully. You need a new outfit. Izuku remarked. Tabita, if you would please go down to the 7th floor and ask for Kenichi, he'll fix you up with some clean clothes. He waved him off. The former villain nodded and obeyed with one last assuring look at his partner. Izuku waited till he was long gone before he spun and faced the red-haired girl in her chair. All friendless gone from his face. Now then. You have your official assignment, and your unofficial off-the-record assignment. Izuku began. Let me tell you about your third top-secret assignment. La Brava looked up at him curiously. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a photograph and showed it to her. The picture appeared to be a black-haired woman in a hero outfit smiling at the camera. Who's this? The girl took the photo. This is Nana Shimura. He paused before continuing on. She's a deceased professional hero from several decades back. This is part of an important personal investigation I'm working on. I need you to research her and find out all her known associates. That's it. La Brava was confused that this seemed like such a simple assignment that anyone could do. If it was that easy we wouldn't be having this conversation. Izuku chuckled. When you have a list of all of Shimura's friends and family. Then I want you to compile a list of each of their known associates and do the same for each person in those lists and so on so forth. I want you to go back as far as you can with this. She paled when she realized how extensive this project would be. When you hit a dead end, then you're finished. I want the names and faces of all of them. I can't stress that part enough. May I ask why? She wanted to know why the need for these people. All you need to know is that this is very important to me and that you are not to tell anyone about this, not even Tabita. He took a step closer so he was looming over her. Do you understand? Yes. La Brava stuttered out. Good luck then. Izuku smirked before leaving the office without another word. We have the place surrounded. Hawk said to the other heroes as they waited for the attack. A rather bold group of villains had held themselves up in the local bank and refused to come out. They had somehow activated the building's security shutters and sealed up the doors and windows, making it difficult for the heroes to swoop in and capture them. Luckily there were no hostages as the bank was closed today. We need to be careful, we don't know what kind of quirks they possess. Death Arms brought up. Plus they're backed into a corner and will probably be more dangerous. Kemui Woods added. You'd think the new #1 hero on the scene would prompt a surrender. The wingman spoke with a sigh. A lot of good the title does me. As they continued making plans they were interrupted by a loud thud from behind them. The pros spun around to see the towering golden armored form of Nemesis. Oh great, this thing again. Hawks thought to himself but outward kept his smile up. Midoriya's Super Titan, Nemesis he called it. The new version debuted a week ago when it rescued a family from a burning apartment building. After that heroic display, it was now all the media could talk about. Stand Azida. The machine spoke with its deep digital voice as it marched past them. God, that thing is creepy. Hawks stood by and let it pass. This was Midoriya's ideal hero? A cold, soulless machine. The robot marched over to the security shutters and yanked them open with brute strength. Nemesis didn't even hesitate to walk into the hostile environment. The pros together watched the entrance, hearing a series of frightful shouts followed by gunfire. The shooting stopped and echoes of a fight resounded. Should we dash? Kamui Wood started only to get cut off. Wait. Hawks commanded. The battle suddenly stopped as quickly as it started. From out of the hole a body was thrown out into the street in front of the heroes. The villain's body was large and muscular and appeared to be encased in boulders of cement. He also appeared to be unconscious with several cracks and fist-shaped impressions all over his rocky body. Nemesis appeared again, walking out of the bank holding two more motionless villains up in the air with both hands. Villain capture complete. The golden robot stated. It dropped the two criminals on the ground next to the other one and made its way to leave. Still alive, I hope. Hawks called with a smile. Of course they were, but he just wanted to get a response. To his surprise he did. Nemesis stopped walking and turned its head to face him. The glowing blue eyes were almost haunting as it spoke again. Life readings, normal. Casualties, 0" was all it needed to say as it turned back, continuing on its way. Well, I guess we were not needed here. Death Arms sneered, watching the back of the robot as it stalked off to continue its heroic deeds more efficiently than they could apparently. I guess we can take it easy from now on. Hawks shrugged. As much as he wanted that, this wasn't what he had in mind. Midoriya was digging his corrupting roots deeper and deeper into the foundations of their society. If nothing was done soon, it would be nearly impossible to remove him. Ugh? One of the villains groaned as he woke up and tried to stand on his feet again. He only got up to his knees before a couple red feathers pinned him back to the street. Ha-er-debase. Amazing. Izuku smiled as he watched the live feed from his personal office of his Super Titan take down 3 thugs with ease. He could see almost everything through the robot's perspective. Nemesis was working out better than expected. Originally he was just supposed to be a temporary solution, but now he was thinking he could keep the machine around and active even after a new symbol has arisen. The gauntlet wearer relaxed in his chair happily. Everything was just going so well, so perfectly. After a childhood of rejection and misery, he finally felt happy and fulfilled. Do you see this, All Might? He spoke aloud with no one but himself present. Do you see this from wherever you're hiding? Izuku's face looked peaceful, but his eyes held vindictive malice. With no quirks, with no special powers, I have improved society and saved lives. He chuckled lightly. Only a mind with a set of powerless hands built this. He looked through the surveillance videos to get a look at how his other projects were doing. Uraraka was being outfitted with a more advanced and even lighter version of her mechanical wings by Hatsum. This new support device would give her even more mobility in the air. That combined with her quirk and grapple pole weapon would make quite a formidable hero. Ida was running laps on the special treadmill that Izuku himself designed just for his quirk. He was progressing nicely. They even had talks about a way to improve his engine quirk. Todoroki had advanced with the fire side of his quirk in leaps and bounds. It seems without endeavor around and his anger towards his father hanging over his head, Todoroki had unshackled himself and was free to explore his quirk in ways he never thought of. Dabi was pushing him harder and harder in each training session. Speaking of which, training room. Come on, you can do better than that. The dark-haired scarred man taunted. His shirt had long since burned off, revealing more of his extensive scarring and piercings. He was left with only a pair of black fireproof shorts, and Midoriya's specially designed dampeners that covered his arms and legs. The devices had scale-like plating and the digits were pointed, giving the appearance of claws. I'm just getting started. Shoto panted out. He had briefly fallen to one knee. Both swords still held tightly in his fists. These were new. After complaining that the previous ones were too heaving and bit awkward to fight with, Midoriya fashioned him a new pair that resembled a pair of katanas. They were lightweight and very easy to swing and incorporate his quirk with. He could launch waves and streams of ice and fire with surprising swiftness now. You look like you're on your last leg. Dabi called out. Is this the best Endeavor's masterpiece can do? He knew that would get under Shoto's skin, and of course it did. The youngest Todoroki immediately stood up and threw a wave of ice at him using the right sword. That's more like it. Dabi grinned and countered with his blue flames. The two attacks collided, but the fire quickly ate through it like starving termites. Shoto used his own fire to launch himself to safety. The raging inferno chased after him, no matter how far he went. The only option that Shoto had was to slam his right foot on the ground and summon a giant wall of ice that reached from the floor to the ceiling of the vast training room. Why is he so relentless? Shoto thought as he tried to catch his breath. He wasn't given much time as steam began pouring off his ice and a scarred hand burned a hole straight through. Not good enough, kid. Dabi smirked even wider as he launched himself at the younger. Shoto created a small ice shield from his right sword that he used to block the incoming fireballs. He knew using his own flames were pointless since Dabi's were stronger and would overpower them. Come on. Show me that fire, boy. The scarred man shouted as he continued his assaults. You'll never surpass your daddy like this. Shut up. His father was still a sore spot for Shoto. Despite not having contact with the man anymore, all it took was a mention of his name to get riled up. Oh, you don't like that? Dabi stopped his attacks in an attempt to rile the other up. Because from my point of view you look just like him. Shoto immediately lost his temper and blasted his own fire at the former villain. There we go. Dabi channeled his own blue stronger fire and met the attack in the middle, creating an intense storm of heat. If this continued, neither of them would walk away unscathed. Energy. Conversion. A voice shouted from the middle as the flames were sucked into a ball of raw power. Izuku held it in his hand before tossing it through a portal. An unfortunate side effect of that particular quirk. The energy had to be used right away and couldn't be stored up for later. That's enough. What are you doing? Dabi asked haughtily. You wanted me to train him, so why are you interrupting? No, I asked you specifically to help Todoroki learn how to better use his fire. Izuku corrected. I didn't say to get him so worked up that you two end up killing each other. Sorry, guess I was having too much fun. The scarred man shrugged. Though the smirk on his face didn't seem very apologetic. I figured you would be best since your quirk is so very similar to Endeavor's. The gauntlet user said, not considering the possible connection. Don't ever compare me to him. Dabi spat dangerously, with a dark glare. Or what? Izuku glared right back. Despite being a good head shorter than the man, the teenager could be extremely intimidating when he wanted to. Dabi broke eye contact first, not wanting to be on his leader's ire. He would never admit that he cowered away. Izuku turned to Shoto. Are you alright? I'm fine. Todoroki said curtly as he put his swords away. You're done for today. We'll pick it up tomorrow. The gauntlet wearer ordered. You've improved so much, Todoroki. You're almost unrecognizable from the young hero who accepted my invitation. He smiled at him as he passed. Thank you, Director. Shoto nodded, happy that his progress was noted and appreciated. With one last glare at Dabi he turned and exited the training room. When he was gone Izuku turned to stare at the black-haired pyromaniac. Do you remember when we first met? He suddenly asked. Yes. You easily placated Shigaraki. I just ignored you until you brought up the hero killer. Dabi recalled almost fondly. Then you manhandled Toga. Do you remember the private discussions we had? Izuku continued to stare at him. About Hero Society. Maybe. The scarred man shrugged, while picking at the dead skin on his jaw. You always spoke so passionately against Endeavor as if you knew him on a personal level. The young director sighed before asking his next question. I'm only going to bring this up once, and if you choose not to answer I'll never ask again. What is your history with Endeavor? Dabi just looked at him stone-faced. He didn't even blink. We don't have a history. He lied smoothly. Very well. Izuku turned away. But remember this. Shoto Todoroki is not Endeavor. He's trying to become greater than that wretched tool could ever be. He reminded. Whatever hatred you have for that man, I don't really care, but don't ever project it onto Shoto ever again. He turned to level one last glare at his subordinate. Do I make myself clear? Crystal clear, boss. Dabi smirked and gave a mock salute. Excellent. Izuku smiled back at him, anger forgotten, as he exited the training room. Damn it. The fire wielder whispered to himself. He took off his gauntlets and swiped a hand through his black-dyed hair. He really needed to do something about this. U.A. What the hell is this? Aizawa asked as he stared at a chess set on the principal's desk, only the pieces were modeled to look like cartoonish versions of real people. Sometimes making it into a game or model helps me organize my thoughts. Nizu explained as he examined his pieces. I've been trying to figure out a strategy to counter Midoriya for a while now with no luck, so maybe I need to look at things from a different angle. Pointing a paw at the first piece on the board, Aizawa noted it looked like Midoriya with a gold crown on his head. Izuku Midoriya. My most dangerous and crafty opponent. Also the king we are fighting against and need to put in checkmate. Who's our king? Aizawa asked. This All Might figure? He pointed at a piece that looked like All Might in his prime Golden Age costume. No. Our king is Hero Society itself. Nizu corrected, pointing at a blank white normal chess piece. And Midoriya, since that day he removed Endeavor and took his position, has it in check and entirely at his mercy. He picked up the All Might piece. All Might was more like our queen. Our strongest champion and most valuable piece. And Midoriya took him out of the game. Erase Your Head reminded him as he took that piece off the board himself and put it off to the side. Yes, and now he has us on the defensive. The principal placed a paw against his furry muzzle and thought. However, thanks to young Ida, we're not playing blind anymore. That is to say, we know who his pieces are now. He lifted a figure modeled to look like the vicious hero killer. The murderous Stain, his loyal bishop. Don't forget the other Bishop Dabi. The underground hero added distastefully. Yes, those two are definitely the powerhouses of his dark hand. Nizu nodded in agreement. Himiko Toga, however, seems more like a pawn with the way Ida described her relationship with our young enemy. An eager lapdog might be a better term for her. He placed these pieces around the king protectively. There we have Midoriya's shadow troops. Working behind the scenes to do his bidding, invisible and unknown. Until now. Aizawa allowed himself to smirk since they now knew who to look out for and catch. If they could just get one, that might be enough to crumble the Mad Gauntlet user's whole organization. Let's not forget his knights. Nizu moved two pieces onto the board made to look like his former students. Shoto Todoroki and Ochako Uraraka. Two promising hero students fallen into Midoriya's hands. Who are the rooks? The underground hero wondered. Ah yes. That would be the new additions to his organization. He placed the first one on the board, resembling a gold-armored robot. Nemesis. His artificial hero. A mechanical behemoth, programmed to be the ideal hero to Midoriya's unfair standards. He chuckled at how Izuku could be considered quite brilliant if he wasn't so obsessed. In another life, had things been different, Nizu would have given the boy a full scholarship to U.A and even made him his own apprentice. His other rook. The criminal duo known as Gentle Criminal and La Brava. Aizawa frowned at that reminder. According to Midoriya's statement, the two wanted to turn over a new leaf and surrendered to him personally. Not that the underground hero bought that pile of horseshit. The former villains were put under probation under Midoriya's employ and supervision thanks to his connections. The whole story didn't get that much attention or pushback considering it was revealed right after Nemesis was debuted. Everyone was talking about that new anti-villain peacekeeping machine and hardly anyone paid any attention to the former villain in Midoriya's organization story. It was almost perfect, but to show Yuta, Aizawa and his colleagues, had the Gauntlet user's crafty underhanded signature all over it. We also have some of his other pawns. Mei Hatsum, Dr. Higurashi, the Titans, and now thanks to Mirio telling us Nightai's vision, we know Eri plays some important role in the future that we've yet to understand. Nizu arranged the rest of the pieces on the enemy's side. Now what do we have? Since our queen is gone, not much I imagine. Aizawa said apathetically. Correct. Nizu explained. We don't really have any pieces that can contend with Midoriya. On the opposite side their king stood alone, facing the unsurmountable odds against the invading Black Army. We do have Lemillion though. He placed a figure down of the third-year hero student in the knight's position. All Might himself placed his faith in the boy and would have made him the next successor of One for All had Midoriya not stolen the quirk right out from under them. He paused as he pondered this dilemma. Plus Sir Nightai entrusted his vision to Togata, and now we know what might happen in the future, something that not even Midoriya knows. Nor does he know we know this. If anyone is closest to becoming the next #1 hero, it would Togata. Aizawa added. Maybe there is a way to use that to push back against Midoriya's stranglehold over the heroes. It was then that the underground hero noticed an important piece missing from Midoriya's side. Who's his queen? He crippled any resistance against him when he took our Queen All Might off the board, so who's his? Ah yes, that. Nizu chuckled. It took some thinking, but I did figure it out, which is one of the things I wanted to discuss with you. He lifted up another figure with pale gray hair and a disembodied hand covering the face and placed it next to the king. Tamura Shigaraki is his queen. I'm not sure I follow. That didn't sound right to Aizawa. Midoriya and Shigaraki had opposing goals that couldn't be further apart, so how was the latter so important to the former's control? Think about it. Toshinori spoke with the Prime Minister. He explained Midoriya's argument for giving him this position of power. One of which was an end to the threat the League of Villains posed. The principal explained carefully. No one has noticed that he has yet to deliver on that promise because of all the other improvements he's made. Midoriya needs Shigaraki free and active. That fear keeps his position secure. Remember how he sent the League on various targets during that period of upheaval after he exposed All Might. Tamura Shigaraki, whether he realizes it or not, is basically Midoriya's puppet and weapon. An ideal hero society needed ideal villains to fight after all. The question is, what do we do with this information? Aizawa wondered. Correct again. Nizu agreed. I was thinking that if we could prove that Midoriya is in cahoots with those three villains, but that will be difficult and relies on him making a mistake, which we shouldn't count on. That was true. Izuku covered his tracks too well. Perhaps we should try removing his queen from the board. Without his attack dog Shigaraki, people and the government might start to wonder what the HRD is good for anymore. What about Night Eye's vision? How do we prevent that? The underground hero questioned. Yes, that's another thing that's been troubling me. The principal frowned in concentration. Togata told us that Night Eye foresaw a battlefield with Midoriya right in the middle. The boy snaps his fingers and everything goes white. He had analyzed this several times, but without seeing it himself it was rather difficult to dissect. Not only that, but the Foresight hero was now deceased, so he couldn't question him on what details he may have seen either. Apparently it all has something to do with Eri. She plays some important role in all this. We couldn't get custody of her. The girl is kept under Dr. Higarashi's care. One of his loyal pawns. Aizawa stated as he stared at the chess piece modeled after the woman, starting to get a clearer picture of what they were up against. What made Midoriya's side difficult to deal with was that it wasn't entirely made up of bad people. There were good souls mixed in like Uraraka, Todoroki, and the Doctor. This would be so much easier if they were all insane bloodthirsty villains like the League. Midoriya is not a violent person by nature. In a twisted way he believes he's doing the right thing and all who oppose him are the real villains who deserve what they get. The principal wondered out loud. Many times he's offered peaceful solutions before resorting to violence. I just can't picture why he would start such a destructive battle. How do we know it's his fault? Aizawa asked. It could be someone else that picks a fight with him. It can't be us. Nizu said. We would never start a fight with Midoriya unless we knew we could physically defeat him. Which right now is impossible. Plus Night Eye warned them specifically to keep Eri and Midoriya apart. So the coming conflict must be centered on the young director and the little girl. If this were like real chess we could just get one of our pawns to the other side and get our queen back. Aizawa suddenly proposed. That's... Nizu paused. Actually not a bad idea. I was joking. The underground said dryly. For now I think it's best we keep the knowledge of Ida being a spy and Night Eye's vision, just between the two of us. I'm of the same mind. The principal agreed. We still don't know how the League of Villains acquired information on our school. With Midoriya's connection to them, who knows what might get leaked to him? This was quite the conundrum. They still weren't sure who to completely trust. I'll contact Mirio and relay him the same. Midoriya could enjoy his victory for now. However, the fight wasn't over for them just yet. 5 months had passed. The Hero Regulation Department had grown even bigger. Its influence and control had increased. Izuku Midoriya coerced and blackmailed his way into more political power. His hands now reached even further than anybody realized. The heroes had no choice but to bow down and follow the young director's policies. His symbol of balance nemesis, ever improving, continued its iron-fisted campaign to surpass these heroes in every way. It knew no fear, nor pain. It carried out every rescue mission and villain arrest with cold ruthless efficiency. Izuku had a birthday during these months, coming in at 17 years old. Not only that but he also grew a few more inches in height and with his constant physical training, filled out a bit more. He was now almost as tall as his ally Dabi. Izuku was honestly happy for the growth spurt. It made him look more mature like an adult, so people took him much more seriously at first glance now. In other big news in this time frame, His first hero trainees, Todoroki, Ida, and Uraraka were given a special free reign license that allowed them to now act and operate as heroes. All the training and preparation finally paid. Originally Izuku wanted to wait a bit longer before sending them out to work more in the field, but in the end decided there was no time like the present. The three of them went to work as an amazing hero team with Shoto Todoroki as their leader, working with several hero agencies. Izuku taught him how to strategize, plan ahead and lead a group, and the dual quirk user took to it with absolute seriousness. His mastery over the fire aspect of his quirk was also coming along nicely. Ida was taking his training much more seriously. His older brother Tensei was starting to regain his ability to walk again thanks to the new technology. The former hero could never return to active hero duty, but it was a comfort for Tenya to know that his brother wouldn't be confined to chair for the rest of his life. It also made him more determined than ever to find out what Midoriya was planning for the future and help stop it. Uraraka had made the least progress. Not that Izuku minded. Her quirk, while versatile, was not particularly powerful and required interaction with physical objects to function. Hence why he preferred a more hands-on approach with Ochako by helping to understand more about the nature of her quirk and finding out all the potential possibilities together. One surprise was his newer recruits Gentle Criminal and La Brava. Izuku was impressed with how quick and efficient they were at plugging the leaks in his department. They had already rooted out several plants from both criminal organizations and the Safety Commission. Izuku showered them with rewards and perks for their wonderful hard work. Finally, after several months of recovery, physically and mentally, Dr. Higurashi deemed it appropriate time for Eri to start learning to control her quirk. Research was done on it, and both Izuku and the doctor believed that they now had a good understanding on how it worked. They decided to start slow, with the girl practicing on insects before moving on to small animals. Just try to relax, Eri. Izuku reached into the box and pulled out another butterfly. Like always, we'll take this one step at a time. He gently placed it into the girl's smaller open hands. Eri nervously stared at the pretty insect. Bugs don't feel pain, remember, so you can't hurt it. They were outside in the exercise field of the care center where Eri stayed. The other children were inside for lessons, leaving them alone without distractions. I'm not sure if that's true, Aizawa thought, but kept his mouth shut as he sat back and observed. He was there to help with her quirk training, as he could shut it down if it went out of control again. Midoriya of course agreed with this concession. It also gave him an excuse to keep an eye on the former villain and maybe overhear something important. Now I want you to take this butterfly and rewind it back into a caterpillar. He smiled as he knelt down next to her. Everything will be fine. Eri cupped the insect in both hands as she attempted to channel her quirk. Her horn had grown a few inches, which Midoriya and Dr. Higurashi theorized signified the buildup of energy needed to use her quirk. Golden sparks emerged from her horn and covered her hands. Good. Try to rewind it slowly now. Izuku spoke softly. It's your power, Eri. You're in charge of it. The butterfly began to regress bit by bit. In a minute it was reduced back into its cocoon state. Suddenly the sparks began to crackle more aggressively as Eri lost control of her quirk. The creature was covered in a glow and then disappeared, rewound to a point before it existed. The small horned girl looked at her empty hands in sadness. Seeing this happen to each butterfly she touched reminded her of what happened to her father. It's okay. Izuku held both her hands gently as he tried to comfort her. The gauntlet felt cold on her skin. These powers I possess weren't easy to get the hang of either. Liar. Aizawa thought to himself. He'd seen all the footage and even fought the kid in person. Izuku was highly intelligent. All the research and analysis into quirks gave him a huge leg up when he put on that gauntlet and suddenly gained the power he yearned for. Maybe we need to approach this in a different way? They'd been through dozens of insects in the past week alone. He looked over at the underground hero. Any ideas from the peanut gallery might be appreciated. Aren't you the self-proclaimed quirk expert? Aizawa fired at him sardonically. Aren't you a teacher at a hero school? Izuku smirked back at him. Then again, you did fail to teach 5 of them. He rubbed that wound, knowing it was still fresh. 4 students. Aizawa corrected him with a glare. I lost 4 students to you. He knew Izuku was referring to Todoroki, Ida, Uraraka, and Bakugu. That's funny because I counted 5. He had that arrogant, I know something you don't, look on his face again. Izuku didn't give him another word as he went back to focusing on Eri's problem. What is he getting at? Aizawa wanted to know, but decided to leave trying figure out Midoriya's plans to Nizu. Izuku always liked to take jabs at the underground hero and the school he worked for. Aizawa would of course jab back when he could, but trying to win a verbal battle with Midoriya was like pushing a boulder up a mountain. I might have an idea. Izuku looked thoughtful as he came up with a new angle to try. Okay, Iri. I want you to close your eyes. The white-haired girl followed his instructions. Now I want you to imagine your quirk as a wheel. Izuku picked another butterfly out of the case and placed it in her open palm while his eyes were closed. Picture that wheel, Eri. Can you see it? Yes. Eri mumbled aloud as she followed along. That wheel is your quirk. You have power over it. Izuku explained. Imagine it turning forward slowly. He watched her horn glow a bit. Not the chaotic sparks that normally erupted when she used it. This seemed more like a gentle pulse. Now slowly grind that wheel to a halt. That yellow aura was now covering the insect. Now slowly turn it backwards. Slowly, Eri. The girl did what he said. Making the wheel in her mind turn in reverse. Izuku watched the insect be reverted back to its cocoon state, bit by bit. Now bring it to a stop again, Eri. Good. The girl opened her eyes and was delighted to finally see her first successful attempt at using her power. It was alive. Reduced back to a younger form, but alive nonetheless. Well done. Izuku smiled at her. We'll stop here for today. For once Aizawa agreed with him. Best not to push the child and have her lose what little bit of confidence she just gained. Come, we'll have lunch to celebrate. He then turned to the underground hero as he generated a portal with his Infinity Gauntlet. Tell Dr. Higurashi we'll be out for a bit. He ordered as he took Eri's hand and led her through without looking back at the scowling man. I don't work for you, Aizawa said after they were gone. Glaring at the spot Izuku just was. Elsewhere. Izuku smiled as he led Eri up to his mother's apartment. His childhood home hadn't changed a bit. Not that it had been a long time. He visited his mother at least once a month, sometimes twice if he wasn't busy. He glanced around seeing no journalists in sights. Many of them had tried to hound and harass Izuku's mother to get more information about him. The worst of them was a disgusting vulture of a woman named Chitose Kazuki. Luckily, due to his political connections, he was able to get restraining orders for his only family member against almost every media outlet and publishers. Knocking on the door, he wasn't greeted by Izuku Midoriya, but by the Titan robot assigned, commissioned, and programmed to protect her. He almost laughed aloud seeing the tall black machine wearing a pink apron. He dismissed the robot with a wave and it obediently stepped aside so they could walk in. Mom! Izuku called out. In here, sweetie. She called back from the kitchen. I brought Eri with me. Izuku led the girl inside. Eri smiled as she ran up to hug Inko. She'd been here several times and Izuku's mother was always so warm and friendly to her. She made great progress with her quirk today. That's wonderful. Inko was happy for her and gently set the girl down. The three of them sat at the table, while the Titan robot ducked into the kitchen to retrieve the lunch that the woman prepared. The three of them had a nice time. Eri looked so happy, Izuku noted. The one thing she wanted was a family, something he couldn't exactly give her, but he supposed this was a nice substitute. Their lunch was interrupted by a knock at the door. First the robot turned and looked towards it, then Izuku did the same. Were you expecting someone? The gauntlet user asked his mother with a curious tone. Yes, actually. Inko looked nervous, glancing back and forth between her son and the door. She really wanted to meet you privately. I think it's safe to assume who this guest is. Izuku had a good hunch who was here. Let her in. He ordered the Titan. The machine marched towards the door and opened it to reveal Mitsuki Bakugu, mother of Katsuki Bakugu. On its master's orders the robot stepped aside, allowing her to pass into the Midoriya home unhindered. Hello, Izuku. The woman seemed calm and reserved. Not the usual loud and boisterous that he always knew her to be. A trait her son seemed to inherit. Izuku stood up from the table to greet her. Nice to see you again, Mrs. Bakugu. He said with politeness, almost robotically. How is your husband these days? Oh, he's fine. Mitsuki tried to smile, but it was clearly forced. Look at you all grown up. You've gotten so tall now. She tried to lighten the tense atmosphere with some friendly compliments. I bet all the girls are lining up at your doorstep, especially now that you're such a big shot. My position doesn't allow for such things. Izuku replied smoothly. Just don't have the time. Mitsuki approached the table and noticed the small white-haired girl sitting across from Inko. This is Eri. One of the children from my friend Dr. Higarashi's care facility. His tone made it sound like that was all she needed to know on the subject and any more information beyond that would not be supplied. I'm sorry, Izuku. Inko apologized. She came to me recently and begged for a chance to meet with you, to talk about her son. Her eyes locked with her own child, hoping he would understand. I couldn't say no. You could have just called. Izuku shrugged as if it wasn't a bother at all. The HRD has a direct line. They would have set up a meeting with me. I tried that. Mitsuki huffed with frustration. Several times actually. They kept saying they would get back with me to schedule an appointment, but they never did. I had to keep calling. How odd. The young director feigned confusion. You must have slipped through the cracks then. It wouldn't be the first. My department is still relatively new and we're currently in the process of working out the last remaining kinks. That was a bold lie. Not the kinks part. Izuku knew full well that Mitsuki Bakugo wanted to schedule a meeting with him to discuss her now fugitive son. He purposely had his offices give her the runaround as to avoid this talk. Clever of her to find a different angle by using her connection to his mother and get a meeting outside the office. Very well, I guess we can just have this now, off the record if you prefer. He smiled in such a fake friendly demeanor. I assume in private. He walked down the hall and stopped at his old childhood bedroom. It looked the same as ever, only the All Might nameplate that used to say, Izuku, was long gone. He opened it and gestured for her to step inside. Mitsuki followed him, glancing back over her shoulder at Inko, who gave her friend a worried look. Eri just looked confused for a moment before returning to her lunch, since she figured it was his business. Once inside the bare room, the door gently closed behind the blonde woman thanks to the telekinetic power of Izuku's reality stone. I never noticed. Izuku started speaking first as he looked around his old bedroom with nostalgia. How empty and plain this room looks without all the All Might merchandise. Funny, isn't it? How much false hope filled the void in my life. He turned the desk chair around and sat down, gesturing for Mitsuki to sit across from him on the bed. So, what is it you want to talk about? Look, Izuku. Mitsuki sighed quietly. I know Katsuki hurt you. The interviews and anti-bullying speeches where you used my son as an example were very thorough. She said with shame to know that Katsuki did all those things. At first she didn't want to believe it, but she knew how rough around the edges and mean towards weaker individuals her son was. Is that what this is about? Do you want me to stop using him as an example? Izuku sounded amused. That could easily be done. He had plenty of other examples after all. The former hero endeavor was always ripe for criticism and being dragged further through the mud. Something which never failed to bring a smile to his ally Dabi's face. No, I'm just asking you to forgive him. Mitsuki spoke with honest sincerity. The room went silent as Izuku just stared at her emotionlessly. Why would I do that? The young director of the HRD asked. Correction. Why should I do that? Please. The way things are now, Katsuki will be hunted down, he'll probably lose and be thrown in prison. She pleaded to his stone face expression. That's how things go, for villains that is. Izuku said rather coldly, not the least bit moved. He broke the law and will pay the price. If the heroes don't get him, maybe my titans will end up beating him within an inch of his life. He began listing off all the ways that her son could be defeated and Mitsuki didn't like any of it. Perhaps my recent masterpiece might be deployed to defeat Katsuki. Your son has always been the tenacious type. Nemesis might have to go all out to bring him down. Izuku chuckled, imagining the potential brutality. Please. Mitsuki pleaded again. What do I have to do to make you forgive him? This has nothing to do with forgiveness. Izuku told her. It's about justice, fairness, balance. Simple cause and effect. Katsuki will suffer the consequences of his actions and that's all there is to it. He lectured as if he was in front of a classroom. You could stop that from happening. She argued back. A single word from you would prevent that. You two were once friends. She tried appealing to his humanity this time with a link to his past. Unfortunately, the young director of the HRD held no attachments to whatever fond childhood memories he had with his former friend. Not that there were many fond memories to begin with. I don't play favorites. Everyone gets equal treatment. Izuku supplied with a smile, reciting like some businessman giving a bad deal. I just gave a speech last week about it. How would it look if I suddenly decide to just let Katsuki go with a slap on the wrist? Please. As a mother, I don't want to have to see my son nearly killed and thrown in prison. She tried again with tears in her eyes, hoping he still had a heart in there. She knew he did, or he wouldn't have brought that little girl with him to visit Inko. Even if he deserves it? Izuku queried. He just stared at her silently, expecting an answer that he knew wasn't coming. He took a moment to consider this. Fine. I'll make sure Katsuki Bakugo is as unharmed as possible. He's still going to end up in the very least a correctional facility, but on my word you and your husband will have visitation rights. Thank you. Mitsuki sighed, knowing that's the best deal she was going to get for her son's sake. However, the next thing he said made her freeze in shock. I'm still going to take away his quirk though. Said so casually as if discussing the weather. What? Mrs. Bakugo immediately lost her cool. You can't do that. Actually I can. Izuku smirked arrogantly. The Prime Minister gave me permission to use the quirk known as All for One to take away the quirks of dangerous villains and heroes who I deem unfit for their position. This applies to rogue hero students as well. He said, holding open his hand, showing her the purple soul stone lodged in the palm slot. It's in my contract. The smile still didn't leave his face. Please, I'm begging you. She was interrupted by his sudden rude laugh. There it is. Izuku said with mirth. You all act like being quirkless is worse than a death sentence. Quirks are all that matter in the world. Never mind actual skill or merit, it all comes down to power you were born into. Nothing is earned anymore. He ranted as his chuckles died down. I spent my whole childhood quirkless and look where I ended up. You and Katsuki are not the same. Mitsuki tried to argue. You are exactly right, we're not. I'm much smarter and stronger-willed than him. Izuku answered back. God forbid that the boy born with such a powerful and magnificent quirk, the boy born with everything handed to him on a silver platter, suffer any hardships in his life. He suddenly stood up from his chair. With his added height he could look down at people a little better than before. You have my word that your son will be alive and in one piece when he's eventually captured. He won't be getting to keep his quirk. That matter was said with such finality that it left no room for argument. Saying all that he needed to say, Izuku smoothed out the front of his suit and walked out of his now plain and empty childhood bedroom, leaving that last piece of his past with Katsuki Bakugo behind. The crowd watched as Shoto Todoroki kept the villain at bay with his ice quirk. The skill and finesse of his power was matched only by its raw strength. The criminal he was fighting had the ability to manipulate asphalt and was using it to wrap that very substance around his body, generating a suit of armor, making him look like a large golem. The civilians had yet to be evacuated, which prevented him from going all out to defeat him. Luckily, with the strategic lessons Midoriya gave him, Todoroki had learned how to think things through and plan. So instead of hammering the villain with ice and fire, he was merely corralling him into a safe zone away from the innocent lives. While that was happening, Tenya Ida used his speed to grab civilians in the area and deliver them out of danger, while Ochako used her quirk to remove rubble and damaged vehicles out of the way. Altogether they were shaping up to be quite a hero team. As soon as the area was clear, Shoto went full force, using his firepower to melt the asphalt. With the special katana that Midoriya designed and built for him, he could hack away at the villain's armor at the same time. The villain panicked and tried to manipulate the melted asphalt to fight back, only for Shoto to freeze it all in place with a swing of his other sword. Once he got through the armor, he grabbed a hold of the frightened villain and dragged him out of it before encasing most of him in ice. Please. The nearly frozen criminal cried. Please don't take me to Midoriya. I don't want to lose my quirk. He doesn't do that to the villains we arrest. Todoroki calmly lectured. You'll get processed like every other common criminal. The police finally converged now that it was safe to approach and started dragging the sobbing, pathetic man away. Ochako, who happened to be hovering close enough to hear their words, levitated down to ground. You'd think if they were so afraid of Midoriya taking their quirks, then they wouldn't cause trouble in the first place. She scowled as she watched the officers take him. Yeah. Shoto didn't pay the villain any more mind, he merely nodded his head and agreed with her logic. Ida, report. I'm several blocks east with the crowd. Ida said through the communicator. Everyone is safe. No injuries to report. Good, we're headed to you. Shoto looked at Uraraka, who nodded back and folded her mechanical wings together so she could walk easier. Midoriya wanted them to have good relations with the public, and not just behave like well-oiled machines. The Titan robots were for that. He gave Todoroki specific instructions to greet and assure the public after their heroic acts. If there was a crowd, at least. No showboating was allowed though. According to Stain, there was fine line between being a true hero that made everyone feel safe and assured, and then there was being an attention whore. The three heroes of the HRD converged together in front of the crowd of civilians who were unfortunately caught in the crossfire of this villainous assault. Uraraka had a naturally outgoing and bubbly personality that was ideal for the public. She smiled and waved at the people and told them that everything was fine, and the villain had been stopped. Ida joined her, putting on a show in case Midoriya was watching. He had yet to determine the full reach of his boss's eyes and ears. Best to play the role he was given for as long as possible. Shoto pulled down the scarf that covered the bottom half of his face and did his best to smile at the crowd. He didn't want to come off as cold as he did at the sports festival. He especially didn't want to be as prickly and unapproachable as his father was when he was a hero. No, he wanted to be a hero that his mother and siblings could be proud of. Shoto shook several hands, politely refused some attempts at gaining autographs and some eager journalists wanting a scoop. His phone suddenly vibrated in his side pouch. He pulled it out to see an unknown number on the emergency channel. How odd. The only one who uses this channel is Midoriya. Hello? Shoto answered. Hello Shoto. A familiar voice responded back. How did you get this number? The half-cold half-hot user scowled, turning from the public so they didn't see his pissed-off expression. I still have connections. They haven't taken that from me. The man on the other end spoke. There's an empty cafe 2 blocks north. I need to speak with you Shoto. The youngest Todoroki was tempted to simply hang up and pretend that this call never happened. However, he wasn't a coward. If this man wanted to speak to him, then he'd accommodate and be done with it. There was nothing to fear anymore. Fine. Hanging up he gave a few quick orders to his team to take care of everything here. He told them there was something he needed to check on and that he'd be back. Leaving the crowd, Shoto slipped through an alley and made his way towards the cafe. What he didn't know was that his phone call was being monitored by a certain individual. Stepping inside the small cafe, Shoto's mismatched eyes landed on his father Enji Todoroki, the former number 2 hero, sitting at a table in the middle of the restaurant, wearing civilian clothes. The man's face was a mask of neutrality as he nodded at his son. The teenager walked over to the seat across from him and sat down, leaning his 2 swords against the side of the table. Shoto. Enji began. You're looking well. His son just stared at him coldly. I see you've made improvements to your fire. You know, if you need some advice in that department, I'm always available. Your assistance is unnecessary and unwelcome. Shoto shut down that possible path to getting reconnected almost immediately. Father and son just stared at each other awkwardly. The silence and tension were almost painful. I spoke with your mother recently. Enji tried again only to get cut off. If you so much as lay a hand on her. Shoto practically snarled at him. We just talked. The older cut him off, trying to lay his son's worries to rest. That's all. Our conversation caused me to take a good long look at myself. The man breathed a long heavy sigh. I'm aware I wasn't always the picture of a good father. There's something we agree on. Shoto bit out the snarky comeback. He was starting to wonder if it was a mistake coming to meet him. The man let out a frustrated breath while running his hand across his face. This is me here trying to apologize. Enji attempted to make amends. For everything. It's too late for that. Shoto denied it. Where was this when I was younger? Where was this apology when you drove my mother mad? When you made Tuya kill himself? That got a visceral reaction out of the former hero. Enji didn't know how to respond to that. He was acknowledged that his son was correct. It was too late to apologize. However, Ray told him that an apology no matter how late was never meaningless. I'm sorry. He said again. Stop. Shoto glared at him. But I am truly sorry. Enji tried again. You just want your quirk and your hero license back. Midoriya warned Shoto that his father might try to petition him if he decided to meet with him. The young director did his best to look for signs of emotional manipulation. I don't care about that anymore. The man swallowed his pride down. None of that mattered to him anymore. He didn't even support his former sidekicks in their protests against the HRD and Midoriya. Shoto just looked at him skeptically. He was sure there was an ulterior motive here. Midoriya told him that there would be. I'm sure you don't. Shoto's heart was still filled with the fire of disdain towards his father. A fire that people like Midoriya, Stain and Dabi did their best to keep kindled. I'm sorry Shoto. The older Todoroki's tone sounded more defeated than before. Stop saying that. The younger raised his voice. Is there a problem here? Enji and Shoto turned to see a tall black uniformed man with a terrifying draconic helmet that hid his face and disguised his voice. And just who are you? The former hero demanded. Special Agent Dragon, of the HRD. The newcomer introduced with glee in his tone. I know who you are, Enji Todoroki. You work for that brat Midoriya. Enji growled out almost venomously at that name. Just because he could now see how terrible of a father and husband he'd been, that didn't erase the anger he felt towards the director of the HRD. No. I work for that genius Midoriya. Dabi corrected with an unseen grin underneath his helmet. He wanted so badly to incinerate the man right here and now but resisted. Midoriya ordered him to leave Endeavor B. What are you doing here, Dragon? Shoto asked. There's no need for you to get involved. Come now, Shoto. Dabi called him by his real name and not the code name he was supposed to use. You know our illustrious director tasked me with looking after your well-being. He said almost playfully. Not like how a special agent should be speaking. More like an amused older brother. Seeing you being harassed by this sad pathetic excuse for a man, father and ex-hero, well, I had to step in. I wasn't harassing him. Enji glared at the agent. Is there a problem with me speaking to my son? Last I checked he wasn't your son anymore. Dabi was growing more and more giddy. He didn't think being this close to Endeavor and mocking him to his face would excite him so much. Being simultaneously amused and furious was a new feeling. It was like his blood was boiling, but at the same time he wanted to double over laughing. It's fine. Shoto stood up from his seat. I was about to leave anyway. Without another word to the two, he walked away without so much as glance towards his father. When he was out of earshot, Dabi turned back to Enji. It's a shame Tuya isn't alive to see you fall so low. He whispered to the now quirkless man, making him flinch. I'm sure he would have loved this. You don't know anything. Enji snapped at him. Dabi just chuckled, which sounded menacing as it was distorted by his helmet. Have a nice life, Enji Todoroki. The special agent continued to laugh as he walked away. Izuku was right, this is a much better revenge. Why kill him when he can let him live to watch him squirm? Like playing with an ant that was too funny to make it dance rather than burn it with a magnifying glass. The HRD city office. Izuku smiled as he stared at his list of new hero candidates. The list was divided into those with quirks and those without. Even though his lists were segregated, he wanted them all to get the same fair treatment. The same opportunities to grow and thrive. There was one name that was submitted very recently, just this morning, that excited him more than the others. It seems a seed he planted was starting to bear fruit. He sent an email to this individual, inviting him to visit at his earliest convenience. With that done, he stood up and left his office. Immediately after stepping through the door, he was swarmed by his secretary. The Prime Minister wants an answer on whether or not you'll attend the expo on I-Island, he said while they walked towards the elevator. The secretaries worked as a group and rotated shifts weekly, sharing their information and amongst themselves to efficiently do their job. Izuku didn't know their names, unfortunately. He simply referred to them as a collective. Tell his office he'll get an answer this evening, and that I'm very interested in going. Izuku talked as he walked through the building. He was hit by a series of important decisions like this every day. One of his goals with the HRD was to eventually get it to a point where it could run on its own without his supervision. All for one had it wrong. It's an exercise in futility trying to rule the world. The plan should be to get the world to rule itself. On a personal note, had the dawn of quirks not set back technology and research into artificial intelligence, Izuku believed that the digital brain in Nemesis could probably run the whole department by itself, if it was more advanced. But that was all just theoretical. Unfortunately, though powerful and analytic, Nemesis basically had the mind of a loyal dog, only knowing what it was told, with no ability to think for itself. Also, the auditorium is filled and ready for the presentation. The secretary finished, interrupting his thoughts. Good work. Izuku stepped into the lift with the secretary and pressed the button for the ground floor. Waving at a few employees he passed, he made his way to the auditorium. Silently he stepped out onto the stage and made his way to the podium in the center. The audience stood up and applauded as soon as they saw him. He looked out at every seat filled by his wonderful employees. Most of them handpicked. Good morning. He smiled at them. Off to the side, but in full view of the public, was a dark-haired man handcuffed to an office chair that was being levitated in the air. The man looked scared and anxious as he floated above the stage. Despite being in sight of the audience, he didn't bother calling out for help. He knew it wouldn't do him any good. Please be seated and we'll begin. Once everyone sat down, Izuku took a glance at the list on his podium for this month's items on the agenda. First, I believe congratulations are in order. The wielder of the gauntlet continued to smile at his employees. Not to me, but to you. He gestured towards the crowd. All of you. In 5 months, we've become a fully functioning government department. A few adjustments, some hiccups along the way, but here we are. Izuku applauded them all himself. Please give yourselves a round of applause. You all made this possible. I'm just the guy with the Infinity Gauntlet. It's the people that make this all work. It started out small, but soon the whole auditorium was buzzing with excitement. Now our next item for the month. Izuku started when the cheering died down. Our wonderful Prime Minister has once again rejected my proposal to tear down the former hero known as All Might's Hero Agency building. Might Tower. He smiled wider hearing the boos and jeers of the crowd at the mention of the X symbol of peace. However, we the HRD are proposing a new angle. To repurpose the empty building into another office for my department. The employees seemed interested in that idea. We will be putting together a team to work on a petition for the project this week. During the entire presentation he never once looked at or acknowledged the bound man suspended above the stage. Until every item on his list was taken care of. For those of you wondering, we are joined this morning by one Kumo Yujiramono. Former member of our little IT team. The chair holding the handcuffed man was lowered to the ground to rest in the middle of the stage. Mr. Yujiramono here is a plant from the Hero Public Safety Commission. Sent to spy on me and my department. Izuku's amused smirk never left his face as he explained. That's a lie. Kumo shouted pathetically. There's no point in deception anymore. My crack security team has found out everything about you. Izuku left his podium and approached the bound man. Even the fact that you're not actually quirkless, are you Mr. Yujiramono? The spy paled when he said that. Many of the staff in the audience who were truly quirkless glared at the man. According to this file, your actual quirk allows you to telepathically interact with computers. It's how you were able to trick everyone into thinking you were good at your job. Such a rare quirk. How fascinating. Izuku chuckled. I could see why the commission would send someone like this. You must have fed them information through the computers with your quirk. Right? I'm not saying anything. Kumo spat out. Oh, you don't have to. The commission will deny everything. Izuku smirked at him. I'm sure they told you, when they assigned this mission, in the event of your capture you will not be claimed. He then waved for someone backstage to come out into the open. Out stepped a young man roughly the same age as Izuku himself with short brown hair and an athletic body in training attire. Please introduce yourself. My name is Niji Ichiban. He introduced himself. Tell them what you are? Izuku commanded in a calm, gentle tone. I'm quirkless. Niji stated with frustration. We met through the training program. Izuku addressed the audience next. In addition to being quite athletic, Niji here is also very intelligent. I saw your grades. You should be proud of your merit. That's right. Niji looked down with a sigh. Unfortunately, due to his quirkless status he is still looked down upon by his peers. Izuku said with disgust. Despite everything I've done, Niji is still not given the same opportunities as those with quirks. I don't think I need to show them your rejection letters from multiple hero academies. He then smirked. Well, that's about to change. Stepping close to Kumo, who glared at the teen, he held his gauntlet out. I think Mr. Yujiramono's quirk would be better suited for someone like you. Wait. No. Kumo struggled in the chair he was bound to. Yes, actually. The soul stone glowed in the palm of his device. And before you start, whatever rights you think you have, were forfeited when you decided to spy on my department. He reached out to grab his head. Wait. Please. I have names. Kumo tried to plead by ratting out other spies in Midoriya's department. I already have those names and dealt with those spies. The only one left is you. Izuku smirked down at him as he took his quirk. The man screamed and passed out from the pain. Izuku then walked over to Niji and placed the gauntlet on his head, transferring the quirk to him. It wasn't a pleasant experience in either direction, but when it was over Niji stood proud and bowed gratefully. Thank you, Director Midoriya. He said from his position. I won't waste this opportunity. I promise. You don't have to bow to anyone, not now or ever. Izuku smiled down at him. I expect great things from you. With that he ended the presentation with thunderous applause from the audience at seeing such a bright young youth given the quirk he deserved. The curtains closed in front of him. Make sure to call the office if you experience any unpleasant symptoms with the quirk. He told Niji before leaving the auditorium. Was that necessary, sir? This week's secretary asked as they reunited in the hall. You usually just have the spies arrested. Your point? Izuku asked as he walked back to the elevator. This public display. It just seemed a bit unnecessarily cruel. He said with a meek voice. An example needed to be made. The gauntlet user explained. I grow tired of the commission sending throwaways to test my defenses. Like children, they need to understand that their actions have consequences. That was true. However, what he didn't tell the secretary was how disgusted he was when it was revealed the spy lied about being quirkless just so he could infiltrate the HRD. He had to pay for that. Tell the Prime Minister's office that I will attend that expo. Izuku changed the subject, after taking a deep breath to cool down. I'll be bringing the Titan robots with me, with some of the support devices I developed. The elevator opened and the secretary rushed to carry out those orders. When he was gone, Izuku secretly pulled out a small vial of blood from his pocket. A little sample he took from the spy before removing his quirk. He allowed himself a small smirk as he pocketed it and headed back into his personal office, where he was met with an interesting surprise. What's this? Izuku stared at the stacks of files on his desk. These were not here when he left. I'm finished. Iba Manami aka La Brava, the co-head of his internal security team, announced proudly from his chair. With? Izuku asked as he approached the desk. Nana Shimura and all her known associates. Plus, the associates of those associates and so on. She smiled at him. I went back as far as I could, just like you told me, and dug up everything I could find. Amazing. The tall gauntlet user was impressed as he looked at the files. Hard copies, just like I wanted. You and your partner will be rewarded handsomely for this. If you don't mind me asking, Director Midoriya, what was all this for exactly? Iba wanted to know what was so important about the Shimura woman and why he wanted to find all these people that had barely a connection to each other. Almost all of them were either dead or too old to be of any use. A secret personal matter, I'm afraid that's all I can tell you, my dear. Izuku deflected the question quickly. Just know that you've helped me out greatly with this. Also, it would continue to help me if you kept quiet about this little project. That will be all. He waved her away dismissively. La Brava looked at him oddly, then left his office without another word. Izuku sat down at his desk and opened the top file. He saw a headshot of Nana Shimura, recognizing the smiling woman's face from his dreams. He started flipping through the other files looking for familiar faces. If his theory was correct, then the other people he kept seeing in his dreams were in here somewhere. He thought back to something All for One told him, once during their private meet UPS, back when he worked for the League of Villains. When the old villain first explained his younger brother's quirk, One for All, to him. A key piece of information that he dismissed at the time. What if it could stockpile more than just raw power? And that's it for today. If you enjoyed, please like, subscribe and support the original writer. See you in the next video?